Ethan lies dying against a cold wall, coughing up blood after being fatally poisoned by the very people he fought so hard to protect. Mark sneers in cruel satisfaction over Ethan's collapse, eager to claim all their remaining supplies alongside his deceitful lover, Chloe. Outside, societal order crumbles completely as armed scavengers dangle precious food over starving crowds just to watch them tear each other apart. Driven mad by extreme starvation, the frantic mob turns on one another in a bloody frenzy just to grab a single bite of rations. However, in a world where supplies dictate survival, Ethan miraculously awakens an incredible spatial ability inside a massive warehouse. Reborn into the past before his tragic demise, Ethan vows to use his second chance to rewrite his fate and conquer the apocalyptic wasteland. Perched high above the infected hordes, Ethan calmly sips a drink amidst his endless hoard of stockpiled supplies, planning his ultimate revenge. As apocalyptic storms rage and massive explosions shatter the skyline, the terrifying downfall of human civilization officially begins. As volcanic haze and fiery skies loom over the city, the imminent doom of the impending apocalypse begins to settle in. A crowded evacuation bus speeds along the highway, carrying terrified citizens who are desperately fleeing the spreading chaos. Inside the bus, passengers brace themselves as unnatural light flares bright overhead, signaling the fast-approaching end of normal life. Anxious commuters exchange frantic news about recent catastrophic earthquakes and sudden mass evacuations sweeping across neighboring regions. Whispers circulate throughout the cabin about massive logistics warehouses and entire bodies of water inexplicably disappearing into thin air. Stunned by the news, the passengers quickly calculate that tens of trillions of dollars worth of vital goods have vanished. Unbeknownst to the trembling crowd, Ethan sits in quiet contemplation, well aware that the missing supplies are safely locked in his space.
While the ignorant crowd focuses on mere natural disasters, Ethan calmly watches as the true end of the world finally unfolds. While passengers naively hope the apocalypse will make everyone equal, Ethan listens in silence, knowing the harsh reality of survival. The foolish idea that a global catastrophe creates a level playing field is nothing more than a dangerous fantasy. Ethan stares ahead, well aware that the coming apocalypse will only amplify cruelty, power, and suffering for the weak. Even as civilization crumbles into ashes, true equality remains a lie, a painful truth Ethan personally lived through in his previous life. He vividly recalls his past timeline, where apocalyptic disasters shattered the world and left burning ruins in their wake. Monstrous creatures with gaping maws descended upon humanity, mercilessly devouring countless helpless souls in a nightmare of bloodshed. Back in that former life, Ethan was merely an average delivery man, completely clueless about the horror about to unfold. He stood in sheer horror as the apocalypse struck without warning, completely unprepared for the bloody disaster that followed. Ethan recalls how intense solar radiation suddenly struck Earth, scorching cities and setting off the chain of events that shattered human civilization. Rising global temperatures caused catastrophic earthquakes, unleashing swarms of monstrous creatures from deep underground to slaughter humanity. Society broke down instantly, turning every corner of the planet into a chaotic battleground, where law and order ceased to exist. In this lawless post-apocalyptic wasteland, severe resource shortages transformed basic food supplies into priceless treasures worth killing for. Warlords hoarded food and tossed crumbs to starving crowds, watching with glee as desperate survivors clawed each other apart over instant noodles. Women were forced to trade away their self-respect, submitting to cruel men for as little as a single bite of sausage. Survival demanded abandoning moral principles entirely, as humanity sank into complete depravity just to endure another brutal day.
Having died in that nightmarish hellscape, Ethan was unexpectedly reborn, returning to the past exactly 30 days before the apocalypse hits. A nervous passenger on the bus clings to Ethan's arm, terrified by the unsettling news broadcast and desperately begging for his protection. Without any hesitation, Ethan cold-heartedly rejects her, declaring that he has far more important tasks to accomplish before catastrophe strikes. Leaving the bewildered woman behind, Ethan steps off the bus and onto the city street, entirely focused on his mission. As he walks along the sidewalk, Ethan contemplates what single asset will matter most when society inevitably collapses into chaos. Reflecting on his past life of starvation, he knows that raw strength alone is useless without guaranteed long-term sustenance. He stops before a massive commercial logistics center, concluding that acquiring massive stockpiles of essential supplies is the ultimate secret to survival. Observing the heavy delivery trucks pulled up outside the warehouse, Ethan formulates a bold plan to systematically secure everything inside. Recalling how searching for scraps wasted valuable time in his past life, Ethan puts on a delivery staff uniform to begin his preparations early. An unforgiving supervisor docks Ethan's pay for arriving seconds late, but Ethan accepts the penalty quietly, knowing money will soon be completely worthless. Recalling how his boss fled without paying him in his previous life, Ethan smugly decides to claim all these warehouse goods as his rightful compensation. With a calm smile, Ethan steps onto the concrete floor and channels his spatial ability, unleashing glowing surge lines through his boots across the room. He expands his dimensional domain, casting a massive radiant dome of blue light across the facility to envelop every single rack of supplies. The spatial system rapidly scans the building, detecting tons of grain, cooking oil, and meat before automatically initiating a massive absorption process.
Surges of spatial energy sweep through the high aisles, pulling thousands of heavy packages and vital food stocks directly into Ethan's pocket dimension. Rows of stacked crates dissolve into shimmering digital particles, completely clearing out the entire warehouse complex within seconds. Inside Ethan's infinite spatial realm, endless towering shelves of stolen provisions materialize perfectly organized, securing his luxurious survival ahead of the apocalypse. Ethan revels in the true strength of his spatial power, expanding his domain across the massive structure to take full advantage of its vast capacity. With his ability unlocked, Ethan can instantly draw anything within a 10,000-meter zone directly into his infinite subspace at a single command. This power allowed him to effortlessly hoard resources without spending a penny, even draining entire lakes and scavenging cities before their ultimate destruction. Standing amid his growing domain, Ethan realizes that no matter how chaotic the impending apocalypse becomes, he holds absolute control over his survival stash. Knowing that even basic food will become a rare luxury soon, he takes immense satisfaction in securing an abundant supply of fresh meat and seafood. Best of all, time inside his pocket dimension remains entirely frozen, guaranteeing his food stays perfectly fresh so he never starves like before. Brushing the dust off his hands, Ethan wraps up his massive warehouse sweep, confident that his immediate preparations are finally complete. Checking his system's detailed tally, Ethan sighs with relief as hundreds of food bags, water cases, and essential rations register into his boundless vault. Checking his system's screen, Ethan admires the detailed inventory of supplies, thoroughly pleased with the massive bounty now secured inside his spatial dimension. Moments later, Greg and his men step through the warehouse doors, freezing in complete shock as they gaze upon the empty room. Staring into the vast, hollow expanse, the men stand in absolute disbelief, unable to comprehend how tons of supplies vanished without a trace.
Enraged and panicking, Greg points aggressively at Ethan, shouting demands to know where the entire stock of goods disappeared to. Unfazed by their fury, Ethan casually operates his glowing system screen, nonchalantly revealing that he took every single item himself. The workers gasp in utter bewilderment, struggling to comprehend how a single man could possibly make an entire warehouse disappear. Losing his temper, Greg orders his guards to seize Ethan immediately. But Ethan calmly checks the time, completely unbothered by their assault. As Greg's guards rush in to tackle him, Ethan playfully waves goodbye before slipping backward through a glowing spatial portal. The guard grabs only empty air, leaving Greg and his men utterly bewildered as Ethan vanishes into thin air right before their eyes. High above the alleyway outside the warehouse,
A tear in space flares brightly with shimmering portal energy. Ethan flips out from the rift and sticks a flawless landing in the narrow corridor, silently praising his secondary superpower. This short-range spatial jump allows Ethan to instantly teleport across short distances, rendering physical barriers and tight squeezes completely meaningless. With this power, scavenging abandoned buildings for hidden supplies and escaping deadly mutated creatures during the apocalypse will be a breeze. Exultant over his flawless heist, Ethan strips off his worker vest and tosses it into the air, celebrating his ultimate supply haul. Leaving Greg and his frantic crew behind to panic over the missing inventory, Ethan comfortably strolls away into the bright afternoon sun. Just as Ethan walked down the street, his phone chimed in his pocket with a government broadcast warning about localized natural disasters. Reading the official advisory, Ethan chuckled at the authorities trying to downplay the imminent apocalypse to prevent widespread public chaos. Before he could put his phone away, a sudden incoming call buzzed on the screen.
Ethan's eyes narrowed in cold amusement as he looked down and saw Chloe's name flashing across the display. He took a slow breath, ready to hear what kind of ridiculous excuse she was going to pull this time. The moment he answered, Chloe immediately launched into a frantic rant, screaming at him for secretly putting his house up for sale. Lounging in bed next to Mark, Chloe hypocritically demanded that Ethan sign the property over to her if he wanted to prove his commitment. Completely unfazed by her shameless guilt-tripping, Ethan listened casually and coldly asked if she had anything else left to say. Chloe issues a fiery ultimatum, demanding the property or no marriage, but Ethan calmly tells her he's returning soon, before hanging up directly. Ethan grimly recalls his past life, where he spent 5 brutal years scavenging food and securing a safe zone for Chloe, only to be betrayed. Ethan stared darkly at his phone, remembering how his previous life ended in absolute betrayal and starvation because of his own foolish generosity. He gripped his smartphone tightly, the lingering resentment burning hot within his chest as vivid memories resurfaced. He recalled how his so-called allies began questioning him whenever he returned from dangerous scavenges with fewer supplies, suspecting he was withholding food. That paranoia quickly turned fatal when Mark brutally murdered him from behind, ending Ethan's years of selfless sacrifice in an instant. With Ethan lying dead on the floor, Mark immediately turned his attention to Chloe, declaring that Ethan was no longer useful. Instead of grieving, Chloe casually dismissed Ethan's death as mere incompetence, showing zero remorse for the man who kept her alive. She seamlessly shifted her allegiance to Mark, caring only about her own survival and immediate comfort. Reflecting on such utter treachery, Ethan vowed never to let himself be exploited or wronged like that ever again. Looking back at his gruesome death in his past life, Ethan couldn't believe how foolishly he had trusted those cold-hearted snakes. He swore that this time around, Mark and Chloe would pay dearly for every single agonizing moment they inflicted upon him. Burning with unyielding fury, Ethan promised himself that his former backstabbers wouldn't get off with a quick or merciful death. He wanted them to suffer tenfold, enduring every bit of excruciating pain and despair that he had felt during his last breath. Taking a deep breath, Ethan slowly unclenched his tight fist, forcing his overwhelming rage to settle down into cold, calculated focus. Realizing he needed massive capital to hoard survival supplies before Doomsday hit, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed his real estate broker, Luke. When Luke answered, Ethan immediately offered to sell his house at a steep 50% discount, provided one crucial condition was met.
He demanded immediate cash in hand, knowing that paper currency would become completely worthless the moment the apocalyptic outbreak officially began. Ethan finalized the urgent meeting details over the phone, determined to secure his funds before time ran out. He arrived at the real estate agency, ready to push through the desperate half-price sale of his property. As a taxi pulled up, Chloe confronted him outside the agency, shouting angrily about how long she had been kept waiting. Dressed lavishly, Chloe fumed with self-absorbed irritation, expecting Ethan to apologize and cater to her as he used to. Without wasting a single second on her useless drama, Ethan coldly brushed past her and told her to get out of his way. Suddenly, Mark stepped forward holding a baseball bat, screaming furious death threats at Ethan for daring to sell the house. Before Mark could swing his weapon, Ethan's hand struck like lightning, moving faster than the eye could follow. Ethan clamped his hand tightly around Mark's throat, choking the breath out of him and leaving him completely helpless. Without giving Mark a single second to react, Ethan asserts total dominance, twisting his grip to gain full control over his arrogant opponent. Mark tries to shout out orders, but Ethan completely ignores his threats and forcefully drives him straight down toward the ground. With brutal precision, Ethan slams Mark violently into the floor, crushing his windpipe and leaving the traitor completely breathless and terrified. The violent impact echoes through the room, proving that in this ruthless new reality, raw strength is the only power that truly matters. Horrified by the sudden display of violence, Chloe shrieks in total panic, desperately calling out for anyone nearby to save them. When Chloe foolishly attempted to intervene, Ethan didn't hesitate for a single second, casually seizing her before she could even process what was happening.
With a dismissive backhand, he sent her crashing across the floor, effortlessly shutting down her desperate attempt to stop him. Collapsing onto the hard tiles, Chloe stared up at him in sheer terror, completely paralyzed by his terrifying display of overwhelming strength. Meanwhile, Mark clawed desperately at Ethan's agonizing grip, feebly begging for mercy as his strength drained away under the immense pressure. His face contorted in horrific agony, Mark realized just how powerless he truly was against the monster he had once betrayed. With a cruel, dark smirk, Ethan looked down at his former enemy, promising that his punishment would be far from quick. Releasing his chokehold, Ethan watched indifferently as Mark collapsed, clutching his throat while coughing violently and gasping for precious air. Terrified beyond belief, Mark frantically scrambled backward across the floor, desperately trying to put distance between himself and his ruthless adversary. Seeing Mark collapsed on the stairs, Chloe rushed to his side in shock, desperately checking if her partner was all right after Ethan's ruthless assault. Outraged by Ethan's cold hostility, Chloe screamed out, threatening that he would lose his chance to marry her unless he dropped to his knees immediately. Mark cowered in fear while holding his bruised neck as Chloe continued her hysterical shouting, completely oblivious to how little Ethan cared about her demands. Ethan cast a chilling, disdainful glance over his shoulder, instantly freezing the pair in place with his terrifyingly calm presence. Unable to endure his deadly glare, Mark and Chloe turned tail and fled down the street, shouting empty threats as Ethan dismissed them as worthless. Later, inside a real estate office, the broker Luke politely handed Ethan a cup of water, eager to finalize their lucrative property deal. Luke enthusiastically offered to purchase Ethan's house directly, wearing a respectful facade while urging him to complete the transaction immediately.
Inwardly, Luke secretly gloated with immense greed, believing Ethan was an absolute fool for selling $1 million home at such a massive discount. Ethan made it crystal clear that the deal required immediate full payment deposited directly into his account that very same day. Eager to secure the unbelievable bargain, Luke enthusiastically agreed to wire the full amount on the spot before finalizing the official paperwork. Within moments, the massive $700,000 transaction cleared, putting a huge sum of instant cash right into Ethan's hands. Ethan knew the government was hiding the apocalypse's onset, leaving ordinary citizens completely unaware of the cataclysm fast approaching. Stepping back out into the peaceful afternoon sun, Ethan began plotting his next move to maximize his apocalyptic funding. As he strolled down the sidewalk, a bright flyer advertising quick, high-interest loans posted on a telephone pole caught his attention. Realizing he wouldn't ever have to pay back a single cent once Doomsday hit, Ethan stepped back to check the contact number. Without hesitation, Ethan placed a call to the loan shark,
planning to double dip by mortgaging his house deed before the ownership transfer cleared. Looking up at the towering apartment complex, Ethan made his way toward the underground loan shark firm to execute his plan. Located inside a high-rise office building, this predatory lending company catered to those desperate for quick, untraceable capital. Stepping into the office of Great Sea Loans, Ethan was immediately greeted with skepticism regarding the true value of his home. Unfazed by their insulting remarks, Ethan sat back in his chair and demanded to know the maximum credit limit available. Ethan instantly recognized the loan shark boss, Rex, a ruthless gang leader who would eventually perish during the coming apocalypse. Rex offered $500,000 in cash for the deed, but Ethan pushed back, demanding an additional $100,000 up front.
Slamming his hand onto the desk, Ethan leaned forward with an intense glare to project complete confidence and urgency. Handing over the original property certificate, Ethan pretended to be a desperate gambler who swore to repay the high-interest loan within 7 days. Rex plays his part perfectly, greedily agreeing to Ethan's terms as long as the property certificate is firmly in his grasp. The trap is officially set. With the deal finalized, a notification pings on Ethan's phone. A massive transfer of 600,000 yuan hits his bank account, fueling his final preparations. Outside, a woman named Ivy fumes with rage, venting to her associate Liam about the man she believes has wronged her. She demands ruthless retribution. Ivy is livid, swearing that the man who dared to challenge her will pay dearly for his insolence. She plots to have her powerful contacts eliminate him. Spotting Ethan in the distance, Ivy points him out to Liam, questioning if that really is the man who crossed them. They watch him walk away. Confirming his identity, the pair decides to tail Ethan. They are determined to shadow his movements and discover exactly what he has been planning behind their backs. Ethan recalls the grim future, how rising tides and extreme freezing temperatures would soon lead to the total collapse of these very city structures. He stares up at the looming hotel facade, knowing that in the coming apocalypse, this building will face total destruction from the incoming icy, surging waters. Recalling that Green City Hotel famously survived every natural catastrophe during the apocalypse, Ethan arrives at the luxurious complex to scout a potential stronghold. Stepping through the grand entrance, he plans to evaluate the high-end suites while securing a massive long-term supply of cooked luxury meals. While raw provisions are already stocked in his warehouse, Ethan knows having thousands of hot gourmet dishes stored in spatial memory will guarantee true comfort.
Inside the dining concourse, restaurant manager Serena greets him warmly, eager to assist whatever high-value customer just walked through the front doors. Ethan cuts straight to the point and asks to book a staggering 1,000 banquet tables, leaving Serena completely stunned by the sheer scale. Quickly recovering from her shock, Serena enthusiastically pitches premium dining packages ranging from 5,000 to 100,000 per single table. Convinced Ethan is a wealthy heir, Serena gleefully calculates a $10 million total, while he proposes paying a tiny deposit up front. Ethan promises to settle the remaining balance in a week, secretly knowing the coming world collapse will erase his debts before payment is ever due. Serena mentally rationalizes taking a slim profit margin on the massive order, knowing that securing a powerful, wealthy client like Ethan will elevate her hotel's prestige in the long run. After asking for his name, Serena politely inquires if such a massive banquet request means he is planning a grand wedding celebration soon. Serena attentively listens as Ethan finishes arranging his massive hotel order, keeping his true intentions hidden behind a grand wedding disguise. To solidify his cover, Ethan even asks her to reserve a luxurious presidential suite alongside the massive banquet. With the contract finalized, Ethan casually strolls out of the high-end establishment, thoroughly satisfied with how smoothly everything went. Ethan chuckles quietly, knowing he just secured millions in high-end meals with a tiny deposit, leaving the remaining bill for a post-apocalyptic future where money will be utterly worthless. Inside, Serena gushes with envy, convinced that whoever is marrying this ridiculously wealthy man must be the luckiest person alive. Before Serena can leave, Jiang approaches the counter alongside her friend, curiously asking about the man who just walked away. Serena turns back to address the newcomers, politely asking how they know the generous client. Jiang eagerly reveals that the man was none other than her boyfriend, Su Chen, unaware of Ethan's deception. Serena shares that her supposed fiancé just reserved a $10 million banquet for their wedding, complete with a massive upfront deposit. Both Jiang and her companion freeze in absolute disbelief, utterly baffled by the news of such an astronomical order. Serena explains that extremely rich men often conceal their true wealth until the last second to test their partner's true intentions. Serena wonders out loud if secret billionaires intentionally play hard to get before suddenly surprising their brides with unfathomable luxury. Ethan calculates the cost of his massive stockpile plans. Selling his home and taking high-interest loans is the only way to fund the upcoming life-saving supplies he desperately needs. Ethan notes that his initial looting spree left him short on critical gear. Even with the deposit paid, he realizes he needs more cash to secure his survival strategy. With a grin, Ethan realizes that if he doesn't fully leverage online loans now, he is essentially wasting a golden opportunity to gather wealth before the world collapses. Ethan goes into a frenzy, downloading dozens of loan apps. He snaps countless selfies and performs various facial gestures to verify his identity across the predatory lending platforms. The verification process is tedious, but Ethan dutifully follows the prompts to shake his head, successfully unlocking the funds he needs to bolster his bank account balance significantly. Success. Ethan celebrates as his account swells with nearly 1,000,000 yuan. However, he knows he cannot rest yet. The clock is ticking toward the apocalypse, and he's broke. Time is a luxury he doesn't have. Ethan springs from his bed, energized and ready to dive back into the market to purchase the remaining essentials for his survival. Ethan focuses on the essentials. He knows that when the world shifts between extreme heat and freezing winters, his survival will hinge entirely on the supplies he acquires today. He turns to his phone for rapid online ordering. Delivery speed is vital, and he needs to lock in his orders before the logistics networks fail during the chaos. Ethan makes a critical call to a supplier, inquiring about current market rates for smokeless coal, a resource that will be worth its weight in gold once winter hits. Negotiating a deal for 2,000 tons, Ethan puts down a 500,000 yuan deposit. He plans to pay the remainder only after the coal is safely in his possession. With his fuel secured, Ethan immediately pivots to his next necessity. He dials an ice factory, wasting no time in placing a massive order to prepare for the heat. Ethan is confronted by a woman who demands a face-to-face meeting, seemingly looking to resolve some past tension or unfinished business between them. The woman, accompanied by a friend, stops Ethan in his tracks. She recognizes him instantly as Su Chen and initiates a conversation with an overly friendly tone.
The duo approaches Ethan, claiming that their friend, Xiao Qian, has been missing him lately. They seem intent on bridging a gap between him and their companion. Ethan recalls how these women often badmouthed his inner circle, specifically noting that Li Na was responsible for letting Xiao Qian move into his private residence. Ethan is clearly unimpressed by their act. He questions their motives, wondering why they are suddenly concerned about him or his property after their past transgressions. The women urge Ethan to hurry up, claiming this is a final test of his character, trying to manipulate his perception of the situation with vague urgency. The woman tries to smooth things over, claiming Xiao Qian was merely testing him previously, and that he shouldn't take their past actions so seriously. She feigns concern for Xiao Qian's feelings, acting as if Ethan is being unreasonable or cold for not caring about the emotional toll he has supposedly caused. She attempts to guilt-trip Ethan into a private walk, apologizing for her behavior yesterday and begging him not to hold a grudge against her anymore. Xiao Qian stands before Ethan with a flushed, bashful expression, putting on a vulnerable act to try and lower his guard while seeking his immediate attention.
Xiaoqian reaches out to grab Ethan's sleeve, attempting a physical connection to manipulate his emotions and force him to engage in their desired conversation. Ethan remains cold and distant, flatly rejecting her pathetic advances. He tells her he has better things to do and dismisses her, leaving her to walk alone. Ethan turns his back on the scheming women, casually walking away while leaving their desperate hands grasping at thin air. Left humiliated, the stunned duo fumes with anger, unable to comprehend how cold and arrogant Ethan has suddenly become.
As they watch him head toward the main road, they notice him flagging down a cab to leave. Unaware of their lingering gaze, Ethan reviews his phone to organize his next essential apocalypse supplies. Refusing to let him slip away so easily, one of the women hurriedly scrambles into another taxi to tail him. Ethan soon arrives at his target destination, a massive commercial ice manufacturing plant. Waiting outside near the gates, a stocky factory manager spots Ethan pulling up to the facility. Approaching Ethan, the manager greets him enthusiastically, surprised by how young his wealthy new client appears. Offering a polite welcome, the businessman beams with excitement, ready to close a massive deal. Shaking hands, Ethan cuts straight to business, asking how quickly they can produce 2,000 tons of edible ice. The manager proudly assures Ethan that their facility operates with unmatched speed and top-tier efficiency. Walter eagerly breaks down the massive deal for Ethan, confirming that 2,000 tons of ice will be ready and delivered within just 3 short days. The transaction is finalized as Ethan scans the code, transferring payment to the ice factory manager to secure his massive stockpile of supplies before the chaos. Walter is thrilled by the quick payout, though he can't help but get curious about why Ethan needs such an enormous amount of ice for his project. With the funds confirmed, Walter's eyes practically turn into dollar signs, already imagining the profit and suggesting they stay in touch for future business deals. Ethan remains tight-lipped about his survival plans, offhandedly telling the manager that this ice is simply a charitable donation intended for the remote Alishan region. Ethan turns away, heading back toward his car to leave, while Walter stands there, still reeling from the sheer scale of the transaction that just occurred.
The manager is left completely stunned, marveling at how a young man could drop such a massive fortune so effortlessly just to secure a delivery. As Ethan prepares to drive off, Walter is still processing the deal, watching the car pull away while the silence of the warehouse settles back in. Walter is caught off guard when a taxi suddenly pulls up to the entrance, wondering who would arrive at his facility without an appointment today. 2 women step out, claiming to be Su Chen's fiancé, and they demand to know exactly what business the manager was discussing with their man just now. Walter casually mentions Ethan's massive, expensive ice order, leaving the 2 women who were tailing him in a state of complete and total shock. The women are left reeling, convinced Ethan must be a wealthy heir to afford such an absurd purchase, while demanding to know his ultimate goal. Walter explains that Ethan claimed the ice was for a charitable donation, leaving the onlookers even more confused by his strange and mysterious behavior. Ethan, meanwhile, reflects on his past struggles and decides to treat himself to a high-end meal before the inevitable apocalypse destroys everything. Ethan settles into a luxury restaurant, marveling at the expensive menu items that were once completely out of reach during his previous grueling life. A waitress approaches, and Ethan finds himself baffled by a bizarre, high-priced mystery dish on the menu that costs a small fortune to order. The waitress clarifies that the dish is a custom creation by the head chef, and Ethan decides to take a gamble and order it anyway. With the meal settled, Ethan finalizes the massive ice delivery, confirming the deposit and setting a strict deadline for the shipment to arrive safely.
Ethan reflects on the monstrous serpent from his past, recognizing it as an ancient creature tied to the floods, rather than a simple mutation. He identifies the beast's return not as a random biological mutation, but as a terrifying resurgence of an ancient ancestral trait known as atavism. A mysterious, vibrant woman approaches Ethan, introducing herself as the head chef of a local music restaurant, while offering her services. She presents a specially crafted dish to Ethan, claiming it was prepared specifically to suit his unique and complex temperament. Ethan watches her intently, his expression shifting as a sudden, shocking realization begins to dawn on him regarding her true identity. Stunned, Ethan questions if the woman standing before him is truly the infamous figure from his previous life that he once feared. He confirms his suspicion. She is none other than Hell's chef, a dangerous individual known for her mastery over forbidden culinary arts. Ethan recalls how she used monster remains to craft irresistible meals, a deadly deception that led many to their demise in the apocalypse. Alice serves up her specialized dual-faced dish, playfully questioning if Ethan is truly hesitant to eat food prepared by such an attractive woman. Two women whisper nearby, gossiping about a mysterious, wealthy suitor. One eagerly declares her ambition to secure her future by becoming a rich wife. The gold-digging duo continues to plot, dismissing the dangers around them as they set their sights on the luxury lifestyle found at the bar. The two women walk away, their minds occupied by fantasies of status and wealth, completely oblivious to the harsh reality of their environment. Ethan sits in the opulent bar, reflecting on the sheer excess of the location and the irony of such wealth existing right before the apocalypse. Sipping his drink, Ethan contemplates the past he left behind, noting how he never experienced this level of extravagant luxury in his previous life.
Surrounded by the vibrant nightlife, Ethan is approached by women at the club who attempt to draw him into their social circle with drinks. Ethan remains cool and detached as the group continues their revelry, watching the scene unfold while keeping his own hidden agenda firmly in focus. Seeking to distract her from a painful breakup, some friends bring Jade to the club, hoping a night of drinking will help her move past her ex's betrayal. As the drinks flow, Jade vents her frustrations to Ethan, mocking her ex-boyfriend's poor taste while questioning the true motives of men in the dating scene. Jade downs her drink, fueled by liquid courage and bitterness, before boldly turning her attention toward Ethan, intrigued by his presence and looking for a rebound. The sudden arrival of Jade's drink hitting the table cuts through the tension, shifting the atmosphere as she makes a direct play for Ethan's undivided attention. A brief, heavy silence hangs in the air between them as Jade leans in, her intentions clear, waiting for Ethan to decide if he will play along. With a flushed face and expectant eyes, Jade makes her move, finally asking Ethan the question she's been building toward all night. Is he willing to be hers? From a distance, Jade's friends watch the interaction, cheering her on and insisting that she deserves better than the loser who broke her heart. Tanya and Mina scan the room, observing the unfolding drama as they encourage Jade to cast aside her hesitation and seize the opportunity with the stranger. The intense club atmosphere turns awkward as Tanya and Mina lock eyes on Ethan and Jade, questioning what exactly is unfolding between the two right in front of them. Tanya and Mina watch in disbelief, wondering if Ethan is truly stepping out on his partner, or if there is something more complicated going on in the neon glow. Ethan cuts through the tension with a bold directive, leaning in close to Jade and insisting they leave the crowded room to find some much-needed privacy elsewhere. Jade is visibly taken by Ethan's assertive and masculine energy, clearly finding his sudden display of confidence to be incredibly attractive as they prepare to head out together. With her heart racing from the encounter, Jade eagerly agrees to follow Ethan's lead, ready to leave the club behind and see where this unexpected spark might take them. The pair wastes no time, moving quickly toward the stairs as the club's vibrant lights flicker around them, signaling the start of their private, high-stakes rendezvous upstairs. The rhythmic sound of their footsteps echoes against the staircase as Ethan and Jade ascend, leaving the bustling party noise far behind in their pursuit of something more. Tanya and Mina call out in a desperate attempt to halt their progress, but the couple remains focused, disappearing into the shadows to continue their heated interaction undisturbed. The club's main floor is left behind as Ethan and Jade make their move, slipping away toward the secluded upper levels to be alone.
They reach a private hallway, the vibrant music of the party fading into the background as they step into a quiet, intimate space. Ethan closes the door behind them, his focus narrowing entirely on Jade as they finally find the privacy they were seeking together. The tension between them is palpable, with Ethan pulling Jade close as they stand together in the dim light of the private room. Jade hesitates, her nerves showing as she speaks up, admitting that this moment is a completely new experience for her. Blushing deeply, Jade confesses her vulnerability to Ethan, leaving him stunned by her sudden, shy admission in this quiet room. Ethan finds himself surprised by Jade's confession, realizing just how much trust she is placing in him during this unexpected, intimate encounter.
Ethan flicked Jade's forehead, snapping her out of her emotional spiral. He sternly warned her to stay indoors and prioritize stockpiling food, sensing the coming storm. The atmosphere remained tense as Ethan gave Jade a hard dose of reality, telling her that romance is a luxury they cannot afford when the future is so bleak. Ethan made his exit, leaving Jade alone in the room. He stepped out into the hallway, closing the door firmly behind him to signal their conversation was finished. Ethan paused, lamenting the wasted opportunity of their time together. He knew he had to keep moving, regardless of the emotional baggage he was leaving behind in that room. Suddenly, a loud commotion erupted in the hallway. Two women, Naomi and Sarah, were aggressively pounding on the doors, demanding to speak with Ethan immediately about his recent behavior. Ethan stood still in the corridor as Naomi and Sarah kicked and hammered at the doors, their loud protests echoing through the hotel, demanding justice for their friend. Ethan sighs in frustration, realizing that the persistent interruptions from those two women have completely ruined his plans for the evening. The world outside burns in an apocalyptic inferno, but Ethan remains focused, his digital interface glowing as he manages his vast stockpiles. A worker approaches Ethan, seeking instructions on where to store the massive shipment of 20 heavy-duty fireplaces he recently acquired. Ethan directs his crew on the meticulous placement of heavy machinery and ice blocks within the massive warehouse, ensuring optimal organization for the long winter ahead. Ethan commands his team to keep the heavy equipment moving toward the back, carefully clearing the entrance as they stockpile supplies for the coming apocalypse. The arrival of a coal delivery sparks curiosity among onlookers, who watch in confusion as the warehouse becomes a hub of strange, high-stakes activity. Tanya and Mina gossip intensely, observing the massive influx of machinery and supplies being funneled into the warehouse by Ethan's efficient, well-prepared team. Alice, the enigmatic chef, oversees the specialized kitchen equipment, her mysterious presence adding a layer of intrigue to Ethan's grand survival plan. Tanya notices the distinct banquet supplies from the Green City Hotel, sparking wild theories about what Ethan could possibly be planning for this massive site. Hotel staff in formal uniforms arrive to unload high-end banquet materials, leaving the onlookers stunned by the sheer scale of the operation unfolding before them. A luxurious dining arrangement and red carpet are laid out, leading Tanya to jokingly speculate if Ethan is planning a massive surprise proposal for someone. The warehouse is transformed into a high-end banquet hall, filled with elegant tables and pink chairs, as staff continue the intense, mysterious preparations for the coming apocalypse. Tanya eyes the luxurious setup, clearly unimpressed by the prospect of a proposal, while she commands her companion to tag along and test Ethan's true intentions. Tanya stands confidently, fully prepared to inspect the extravagant scene Ethan has curated, her mind fixated on securing a life of wealth and status for herself. Tanya confronts Ethan directly, demanding to know why he is hoarding such massive quantities of supplies and what exactly he is planning behind the scenes. Ethan continues his work, barely acknowledging the onlookers, as he focuses on his mission while Tanya and her companion hover nearby, waiting for an opening. Ethan brushes off the intrusion, calmly instructing the women to assist with the manual labor,
before he reveals the secrets behind his massive, desperate stockpiling operation. A dark inner monologue reveals Tanya's shallow ambition as she contemplates the benefits of being with a wealthy man while maintaining her own pride and standards.
Tanya scoffs at the suggestion of doing any physical work, flatly refusing to engage in such menial tasks, as her obsession with becoming a rich lady takes precedence. Tanya views Ethan's demand for labor as a cryptic test, convinced that succeeding will secure her status as a wealthy lady by his side. Tanya and her associate Lee Na exchange nervous glances, realizing that if they want to get close to Ethan, they have to start working. Tanya forces a brave face, determined to prove she isn't some fragile flower, and prepares to handle the heavy cargo herself to impress him. Struggling under the weight of the massive crates, Tanya finds the manual labor significantly more grueling than she initially anticipated. Grunting with exertion, Tanya clings to the hope that this physical trial is the final gateway to a life of luxury with Ethan. The weight of the box threatens to crush her resolve, but she persists, desperate to maintain her composure while moving the inventory. Seeing the opportunity to potentially win Ethan's favor, Lee Na drops her hesitation and jumps in to assist with the heavy lifting. Lee Na plants her feet, ready to tackle the boxes, hoping that showing her utility will finally capture Ethan's elusive attention. Tanya watches Ethan intently, her mind racing with suspicion. She desperately tries to piece together what he is actually planning behind his calm, calculated facade. Ethan turns his gaze toward her, wearing a knowing, cryptic smirk. He is fully aware of their curiosity, but he has no intention of revealing his secret just yet. Ethan refuses to let free labor go to waste, knowing that moving thousands of tons of ice and food would otherwise take far too long. As the sun begins to set, the exhausted group finally finishes hauling the last heavy blocks into the storage facility. Collapsing from sheer fatigue, the women bitterly complain about slaving away all day without even being offered a single meal. Sweating profusely, Tanya fumes silently, vowing to seize all of Ethan's fortune the moment she manages to marry into his wealth. Her legs tremble violently in high heels, leaving puddles of sweat on the concrete floor after hours of grueling manual labor. Her companion gasps for air on the ground, furious that Ethan made them carry massive ice blocks weighing over 100 pounds each. Dropping to her knees, she pants heavily, her body completely drained from hauling freezing cargo under the unrelenting heat. Delusional despite her agony, Tanya angrily insists that Ethan should now officially announce her as his bride in front of rich guests. She curses Ethan in utter frustration, enraged that her grand dreams of marrying into luxury are quickly turning into a miserable nightmare. Meanwhile, Ethan hands thick red envelopes full of cash to the actual delivery drivers, leaving them stunned by his overwhelming generosity. Overjoyed by the unexpected massive bonus, the delivery men bow deeply and shout their enthusiastic gratitude to their generous new boss. Clutching their hefty rewards, the workers eagerly wait to see if Ethan has any additional paid tasks for them to complete. Tanya stood trembling by the doorway, exhausted from hauling heavy boxes, while Ethan looked back at her with absolute cold indifference. Ethan bluntly dismissed her, thanking her for the manual labor, while making it crystal clear that she wouldn't receive a single cent of payment. She froze in utter shock as Ethan casually turned his back on her, completely unbothered by her distress and exhaustion. Desperate to salvage her grand ambitions, Tanya refused to accept reality and tried to convince herself that this was all just a sick joke. She pleaded desperately, begging him to stop teasing her and reminding him of their plans to get married and live a lavish lifestyle together. Ethan shattered her dreams instantly, casually revealing that he had sold off his house and accumulated massive debts, asking if she still wanted him. While Ethan calmly walked through his loaded warehouse, the shocking revelation sent immediate shockwaves through everyone standing around him. Mark flew into a rage, screaming in disbelief that Ethan could possibly be broke after spending millions on extravagant banquets and endless luxury orders. The treacherous villain lost his composure entirely,
shouting furiously as his greed-fueled dreams of exploiting Ethan's wealth instantly crumbled to dust. Ethan nonchalantly spun a ridiculous story, claiming he was merely managing all these massive food shipments for an anonymous millionaire's poverty relief charity. Standing coolly beside mountains of stockpiled goods, Ethan acted completely penniless, leaving his greedy tormentors stranded with nothing to exploit. Tanya's face darkened with pure fury as the horrifying truth settled in, realizing she had been utterly tricked into doing backbreaking labor for nothing. Tanya explodes in a fit of rage, accusing Ethan of deceiving her with his fake sob story about being broken in debt. Ethan stands his ground, his expression cold and indifferent, as Tanya desperately tries to claw at him in her frustration. Ethan calmly shuts her down, asking what exactly he lied about, effectively gaslighting her while maintaining his icy, superior composure. Without hesitation, Ethan pushes back, forcing Tanya to stumble away as his dismissive attitude keeps the upper hand in this confrontation.
The scene shifts to the group's confusion as Ethan doubles down on his claims, insisting the supplies are just for a charity project. Tanya collapses, looking more pathetic than ever as her plans to manipulate Ethan into a commitment completely fall apart before her eyes. Ethan looks down at her with pure disdain, labeling her a gold digger and making it clear she means absolutely nothing to him. Tanya is pushed to her breaking point, screaming in sheer fury at the man who has utterly humiliated her in front of everyone. Tanya and her associate Mina lash out with desperate threats, vowing that Ethan will live to regret his cold-hearted treatment of them today. They scream that Ethan is finished, convinced their empty threats will somehow intimidate a man who holds all the cards in this scenario. Ethan turns his back on them, unimpressed, knowing full well that when the apocalypse hits, they will be the ones begging for his mercy. Ethan walks away, leaving the fools behind as he prepares for the true chaos of the coming Doomsday, his path forward clearly defined. Chian assures her brother that she'll make Ethan pay for his earlier disrespect, confident that her powerful sibling will easily handle the situation and settle the score. Mina cozying up to her new man, gloating that his wealthy brother in Shangdu makes him a far better catch than that loser Ethan ever was. Ethan sits calmly, unimpressed by the drama, while Mina continues her petty insults, oblivious to the fact that her new partner is about to trigger a confrontation. Mina spots Ethan and immediately begins shrieking, desperate to stir up trouble by claiming he laid hands on her, hoping to provoke a violent reaction from her boyfriend. Mina's boyfriend points an accusing finger at Ethan, his face twisted in rage as he demands retribution for the supposed disrespect shown to his partner.
The confrontation escalates as Mina's boyfriend aggressively confronts Ethan, fully prepared to teach him a painful lesson while surrounded by his entourage. Ethan remains unfazed, casually eating while the aggressive man looms over him, threatening him for daring to cross his little brother earlier that day. The massive cigar-smoking gang leader steps in, looking down on Ethan with cold amusement while his underlings surround the table, waiting for the signal to strike. The leader reveals that Ethan is already in deep trouble, having defaulted on a massive 600,000 loan that is due for repayment the very next day. With the threat of the loan hanging over him, the men grin, eager to combine their personal vendetta with the business of collecting a massive unpaid debt. Mina and her friend whisper amongst themselves, convinced that Ethan is finished, mocking his inability to pay back the intimidating gang leader in this lifetime. Mina stands tall, smugly judging Ethan, fully convinced that his financial ruin is inevitable and that he has no hope of escaping the wrath of her protectors. Ethan is just trying to grab a bite to eat, but his peace is shattered by unwanted guests who seem determined to ruin his meal. Unfazed by the surrounding hostility, Ethan calmly wipes his mouth, clearly having zero respect for the loudmouth thugs attempting to intimidate him. The aggressive loan shark leans in, sneering at Ethan's audacity to dine in luxury while his massive debt remains unpaid and overdue. The thug continues his verbal assault, warning Ethan that even if he scraped together the cash by tonight, it simply wouldn't be enough. Fueled by a petty grudge, the instigator goads his boss to stop talking and finally silence the man who dared to touch him.
The gang surrounds Ethan, their faces twisted with arrogance, fully expecting him to tremble under the weight of their combined aggressive posturing.
A woman steps in, attempting to play the mediator and de-escalate the tension before the situation spirals into a full-blown violent confrontation. The loan shark demands total submission, insisting that Ethan get on his knees and apologize to his crew if he wants to walk away unscathed. A newcomer arrives, cutting through the shouting to address the protagonist directly, clearly confused by the tense standoff taking place in the dining area. Ethan remains completely stoic, brushing off the interruption and the threats, signaling that the lives of these thugs mean absolutely nothing to him. The thugs continue their tirade, foolishly believing their intimidation tactics will work on a man who has already seen the end of the world. The leader loses his cool, his face twisted in a pathetic rage as he prepares to escalate the confrontation against Ethan. With a violent slam against the table, the thug attempts to assert his dominance, oblivious to the fact that his time is running out. Suddenly, an imposing figure enters the room, cutting through the tension with a question that immediately silences the aggressive group of thugs. The newcomer demands to know who gave these criminals permission to cause a scene in such an important establishment, his tone dripping with authority. The man stands tall, his cold, piercing gaze making it clear that he is not someone to be trifled with by petty street-level thugs. The tension shifts as the newcomer looms over the scene, his presence effectively neutralizing the aggression of the loan shark's goons. The thug's expression shifts from pure rage to sudden, overwhelming terror as he finally recognizes the dangerous man standing right before him. The thug desperately tries to mask his fear with a sycophantic grin, attempting to butter up the newcomer to avoid a brutal confrontation.
The newcomer coldly warns the thug to cease his disruptive behavior immediately, making it clear that he will not tolerate any disrespect in his presence. Ethan shifts his focus to the local powerhouse, Victor, a man who masks his massive criminal syndicate behind a polished corporate image. Crossing him is a fatal mistake. Victor keeps a cool, intimidating facade, but his influence in the city's dark corners makes him a major player that even the most ruthless must acknowledge and respect. A subordinate nervously defers to Victor, promising to catch up later. It is clear that being in Victor's orbit, known as the Skull Crusher, is an exercise in survival. Ethan recalls the past timeline, where Victor was a dominant force, even commanding the infamous Hell's Chef. The hierarchy of the underworld was brutal, and Victor sat atop it. Ethan realizes the Green City Hotel was ground zero for the first atavistic mutations. This explains how Victor gained his terrifying power so early in the chaos. Connecting the dots, Ethan identifies the source of the Skull Crusher's strength. He doesn't show fear. Instead, he calculates exactly how to pivot this discovery to his advantage. With a cold, calculating gaze, Ethan decides that Victor's golden opportunity is no longer his. He's ready to snatch that power for himself before the apocalypse fully unfolds. Ethan finds himself under the intense, calculating gaze of a mysterious figure who seems to see right through his calm facade. The man stands tall, unimpressed by Ethan's presence, casually commenting on the sharp, dangerous look in Ethan's eyes. A digital stream of data flickers across the scene, hinting at a hidden system or secret information being processed. Ethan holds up cryptic signs, his expression unreadable as he stands before the swirling, mysterious code of the system. Amidst a world consumed by fiery chaos and encroaching shadows, Ethan remains focused on his terminal, preparing for the apocalypse. The sharp sound of heels clicks against the pristine floor as a mysterious woman steps forward, signaling a new encounter.
A man pours expensive wine, announcing the arrival of Miss Elena as requested. The atmosphere turns heavy and tense as they prepare to meet. Elena stands poised, her striking pink hair and sharp gaze commanding immediate attention in the room. She remains silent, waiting for the man to speak. Elena is wary, silently questioning what the man, referred to as Mr. Sun, could possibly want with her. She prepares for a difficult conversation. The man, Mr. Sun, offers a superficial compliment, claiming he has long desired to meet the famous beauty in person. He holds out a glass.
With a sinister smile, Mr. Sun insists that Elena join him for a drink, his demeanor suggesting he has a hidden, darker agenda in mind. A brief flashback interrupts the scene, showing men cooling off at a pool, oblivious to the high-stakes manipulation unfolding elsewhere in the building. Elena takes the glass, her expression shifting to one of visible alarm as she stares into the wine, sensing something is deeply wrong here. The glass is held firmly as it begins to tremble, the liquid swirling. Elena realizes she may have walked into a dangerous trap set by Sun. Sun swirls the liquid in the glass, his movements calculated and precise as he prepares to ensnare his unsuspecting guest with a seemingly innocent, yet potentially lethal, alcoholic offering. Sun gazes out the window, reflecting on his past life where he survived the brutal heat wave by hiding away, nursing old grudges that he is now eager to resolve. He admits that he never intended for his target to trail him here, but now that she has, he views her unexpected presence as the perfect chance for retribution. With a cold, composed expression, Sun takes a slow sip of the drink, his mind already spinning dark schemes to turn the tables on his unwanted visitor tonight.
He stares into the distance, savoring the irony of the situation. Settling these old scores is no longer just a desire. It has become a golden opportunity for him. Standing alone in the dim light, his posture remains relaxed, masking the predatory intent lurking beneath his calm exterior as he waits for the trap to finally spring shut. Outside the building, others begin to notice the unnatural, oppressive climate. The sweltering heat is intensifying after sundown, signaling that the catastrophic apocalypse is truly beginning to accelerate now. The screen dissolves into a hazy, pink-tinted void, leaving the scene in an eerie, unsettling silence as the environment itself begins to warp under the pressure of the heat. Two men share a lecherous conversation, eagerly anticipating the arrival of women in swimsuits, unaware of the atmospheric changes occurring outside their current bubble of depravity. The duo continues their suggestive banter, holding a yellow novelty toy, completely oblivious to the unsettling transformation of the world around them as the night grows strange. Two women, Bella and Clara, emerge into the night, immediately struck by how the moon glows with an unnatural, blinding intensity, almost mimicking the scorching power of the sun. The two women walk through the night, their casual swim attire starkly contrasting with the eerie, luminous sky that continues to cast a haunting light over the landscape. A close-up shot focuses on their feet as they move forward, the ground illuminated by the strange lunar radiance that signals the world's deepening ecological instability. Bella and Clara lock hands, gazing up at the massive, glowing orb in the sky, their expressions a mix of confusion and wonder at the celestial anomaly above. As the moon hangs heavy and bright, a dramatic declaration of love is made, romanticizing the cosmic event as if it were a sign rather than a warning.
A man attempts to frame the unnatural, terrifying celestial event as a witness to their romantic commitment, completely missing the grave danger lurking in the night sky. While some enjoy a carefree night, the atmosphere grows heavy. The heat is becoming unbearable, and the call for a refreshing dip in the pool signals a brewing storm. A mysterious hand clutches a glass of wine, the liquid swirling as if reacting to an unseen force. The tranquility of the evening is about to be shattered completely. Standing before the window, an ominous figure watches the moon. He speaks chilling words, knowing full well that the romantic facade of the night is a lie hiding destruction. The moon begins to shift, its light turning a deep blood red. The world outside is changing, and the time for secrets and safety is quickly coming to an end. With a final toast to the chaos, the end of the world truly begins. Darkness is descending, and the nightmare that everyone feared is finally arriving at their doorstep. The earth begins to tremble violently. The red sky pulses with raw energy, signaling that the cataclysmic event has officially commenced, leaving everyone vulnerable to the unfolding doom. The massive red orb looms over the horizon, casting a terrifying glow.
The vibrations intensify, tearing through the peace and announcing the start of a brutal, unforgiving era. A massive impact rocks the ground as the apocalypse takes hold. The world is thrown into turmoil, and the survival struggle for every soul has now officially started. As the crimson light washes over the resort, Bella and Clara recoil in sheer terror, their leisure time shattered by an immediate, inexplicable threat to their very existence. Panic erupts as the sinister red glow intensifies, forcing the group to abandon their pool toys and scramble for safety, while the world spirals into total chaos.
The atmosphere turns deadly. The group realizes the environment itself has become a lethal trap, with every second spent in the open putting their lives at extreme risk. A man watches the unfolding disaster with grim realization, noting that no one is safe from the impending catastrophe currently tearing through the fabric of their reality. Screams fill the air as the group flees, the skin-searing intensity of the red sky proving that this is no ordinary night. It is a full-blown apocalyptic nightmare. The frantic retreat continues, with the group desperately pushing their bodies to the limit to escape the burning atmosphere and reach the relative security of the hotel. Driven by pure survival instinct, they abandon their plans, shouting for everyone to head back to the hotel before the strange, blinding celestial light consumes them all. Inside, the tension is palpable as a group of card players remains blissfully ignorant, oblivious to the life-or-death struggle happening just outside their windowed sanctuary. The poolside chaos reaches a fever pitch as Bella, Clara, and their panicked group frantically shove their way through the doors, desperate to escape the sweltering, unnatural heat wave. They burst inside, still wearing their swimwear and carrying pool floats, their eyes wide with terror as they flee the scorching, mysterious red sky engulfing the hotel grounds outside. Inside, the card players look up in confusion, bewildered by the sudden intrusion and the horrifying sight of their pierced skin turning an alarming, flushed shade of red. As the temperature spikes to lethal levels, the desperate survivors scream in agony, begging for relief while the air inside begins to shimmer with intense, unbearable heat. Total panic erupts as the survivors become delirious from the sudden heat stroke, their bodies failing as they frantically hunt for any remaining source of cooling water to survive.
The situation turns dire as the heat causes physical pain, forcing the survivors to clutch their faces in agony, while the environment itself begins to distort around them. Desperation drives them to a breaking point. They violently smash the massive aquarium, risking everything to reach the water inside as the apocalypse claims the hotel. The aquarium shatters, sparking a savage brawl among the dying survivors, who claw and shove each other, fighting to claim the final drops of precious water for themselves. The poolside guests panic as the intense heat triggers a terrifying transformation. They frantically question what is happening to their bodies as the environment turns deadly. The chaos escalates as survivors desperately search for Hai, but the scorching heat is already taking a gruesome toll on everyone caught in the sweltering hotel air. A man stares in horror, his eyes bloodshot and skin blistering as the extreme temperature begins to cook him alive from the inside out, demanding immediate medical relief. The man's body erupts in agonizing, painful sores as the heat wave intensifies, leaving him a disfigured, smoking wreck, begging for help as his skin literally begins to burn. Panic ensues as companions scramble for medical supplies, while the dying man directs his final, hateful rage toward Xiaoyu, cursing him as his body succumbs to the heat. A desperate survivor clings to his dying companion, pleading for forgiveness, while questioning why others, like Miss Duan, remain detached from the frantic, life-or-death scramble for water. Sun maintains a cold, calculating composure, ignoring the surrounding suffering while he listens to a proposal for a banquet, completely unbothered by the hellish apocalypse unfolding nearby. The scene devolves into pure agony as the remaining guests scream in torment, their skin bubbling under the relentless, lethal heat that has turned the world into an oven.
An intimidating, balding man looms over his guest, aggressively demanding compliance and asserting his absolute authority over the wine being served in the room. The tension spikes as a victim realizes they've been manipulated into a dangerous trap by the schemes of a local power player known as Sun. A pink-haired woman stands frozen in fear, realizing she is being watched by a cold, imposing figure standing right behind her in this high-stakes standoff. She internally rages against Sun, fully aware that his cruel reach has now extended to her, leaving her trapped in his web of malice and power. The glass of wine in her hand feels like a death sentence, serving as a chilling reminder of the sinister game Sun is currently playing with her. Paranoia sets in as she stares at the glass, certain that the liquid inside is tainted, and refusing to consume the potentially lethal substance before her. She trembles, clutching the glass tightly, while desperately searching for a way out of the impossible, life-threatening situation Sun has forced upon her today. Suddenly, a massive, explosive force erupts, completely engulfing the room in a blinding, chaotic blast that shatters the fragile tension of the entire confrontation. Amidst the blinding crimson glow of the explosion, the mysterious Alice stands tall, clutching her glass of wine with an eerie, composed elegance that defies the surrounding destruction. The chaos intensifies as a desperate individual screams for water, their throat parched and spirit breaking, while the environment fractures into a frantic, disjointed struggle for basic survival.
As the temperature spikes to dangerous levels, onlookers scramble to draw the curtains, desperate to block out the searing, unnatural heat waves pouring into the building. Inside, tension mounts as the group notices that something is fundamentally wrong with the environment, prompting an urgent need to investigate the chaos unfolding downstairs. The panic spreads through the room, leaving the guests confused. Meanwhile, an elegant woman sips her wine, seemingly unfazed by the growing commotion around her. A frantic staff member pleads for calm, insisting that a rescue team has been contacted, but the desperate crowd refuses to wait any longer for help. The guests are spiraling. They have millions of dollars at stake and refuse to stay put, prioritizing their wealth over the warnings of the terrified hotel staff. Tension hits a breaking point as the men realize the situation is dire. They call for an update on the crisis, fearing the worst is yet to come. The news confirms their darkest fears. The moon is glowing, temperatures have skyrocketed to 70 degrees, and hundreds are already suffering from the brutal, sudden heat wave. A phone call provides a chilling update from the city hotel, demanding an immediate response as the external environment continues to rapidly deteriorate into a total nightmare. The man on the phone, sweating and overwhelmed, begrudgingly accepts the grim instructions from the other side, realizing the severity of the life-or-death situation they now face. The pressure mounts as they question the status of their contact, Zhao, wondering if he can even survive the rapidly worsening conditions in the city's heart. With the city grid struggling, the men struggle to find aid. Communication lines are breaking down as the heat creates a sense of total, suffocating panic. Hai is clearly suffering from the heat. His condition is worsening rapidly, and his companions realize that medical attention is no longer a luxury, but a necessity.
The group debates how to reach the hospital amidst the sweltering temperatures. Panic sets in as they realize their mobility is limited by the brutal, rising heat. To solve their dilemma, a plan is formed. One of them promises that a driver will arrive soon to transport them to safety, despite the dangerous environment. Hai's physical state is deteriorating at an alarming rate. The visible blisters and exhaustion suggest he is falling victim to the intense, unnatural climate shifts occurring globally. The driver confirms his position in the underground garage. He prepares to make his move, unaware of just how treacherous the outside world has truly become today. The driver notices the bizarre weather conditions. The heat is becoming impossible to ignore, leaving him baffled as he prepares to pick up his desperate, waiting passengers. The vehicle pulls out of the garage. The driver urges everyone to remain calm and wait, promising they are on their way to help despite the chaos.
The atmosphere is suffocating. Even in the vehicle, the driver questions the strange intensity of the sun, sensing that something is fundamentally wrong with the world's climate. Eyes locked on the road, the driver navigates the scorched streets. He remains focused, determined to reach high before the worsening heat renders the mission completely impossible. The tires screech against the melting asphalt. The extreme thermal pressure is already affecting the road surface, adding another layer of danger to this high-stakes, frantic rescue attempt. The vehicle speeds toward its destination. Sunlight bathes the empty, sweltering streets as the driver races against time, hoping to extract high before the environment turns deadly. The extreme heat proves too much for the vehicle, causing all 4 tires to blow out instantly on the scorching, melting pavement. The mission has hit a major snag.
The driver steps out, frantic and overwhelmed, as the asphalt literally cooks his footwear. The environment has become a death trap, making simple movement a dangerous, agonizing struggle. Desperate, the driver calls high to explain the situation. With the car disabled and the ground turning into a sticky, heated hazard, he declares he must turn back. Abandoning the stranded vehicle, the driver tells the group he's done. He leaves them to fend for themselves, prioritizing his own survival over the dangerous rescue mission ahead. As he attempts to walk away, the intense heat causes his shoe soles to melt and fuse with the road, pinning him down in a terrifying, unexpected predicament. A dark figure approaches, wielding a weapon. It's Ethan, appearing from the shadows with a cold, focused gaze, ready to confront the man who dared to abandon his post. The driver panics as his feet remain glued to the burning ground. His attempts to pull free met with a sickening, tearing sound as the rubber melts away. He struggles violently, his foot straining against the molten surface. The heat is relentless, and he is trapped, unable to escape the literal grip of the earth beneath him. Suddenly, the driver is struck down, collapsing onto the searing road as electrical energy crackles around him. He is left defenseless, completely at the mercy of his surroundings. A horrifying, scorched creature looms over the fallen driver. Its skin is blistered and ruined, staring with dead, hollow eyes as it prepares to finish off its prey. Clutching the edge of the road, the driver screams in agony. The environment itself is hostile, turning every surface into an obstacle that demands a painful, bloody price. The driver looks up in sheer terror, his face a mask of sweat and panic as he realizes his phone and his only connection to safety is slipping away forever. A desperate phone call flashes on a dropped screen, the caller ID revealing an urgent plea from Brother Hai as terror grips the scene. Horror unfolds as onlookers watch, paralyzed, while the chilling sound of someone's final moments echoes through the sweltering, death-trap air. The phone clatters to the ground, the connection still live, while labored, frantic breaths signal the end of a very short-lived struggle. In a chaotic blur of movement, the device is abandoned to the heat, leaving the connection to Brother Hai severed by the brutal reality. The screen remains active, the caller's voice calling out for Xiaodao, but only the oppressive, scorching silence of the apocalypse answers back. The call finally ends, leaving the phone discarded and forgotten amidst the unfolding tragedy that consumes the city streets. Meanwhile, the climate control hums, a stark contrast to the chaos outside, as the temperature is dialed down to a chilly 16 degrees. The luxury room remains serene and untouched, a private sanctuary hidden away from the hellish, melting inferno currently ravaging the world below. A drum set sits silently in the corner, a relic of a normal life that feels like it belongs to an entirely different existence. Ethan remains deeply asleep in his bed, blissfully unaware of the death and frantic calls taking place in the dangerous heat outside. The protagonist rests, his peaceful slumber a sharp, haunting contrast to the brutal, relentless survival struggle happening just beyond his secure, air-conditioned walls. Desperate survivors swarm together, begging for any scrap of help as the world burns. Their frantic pleas for resources grow louder, but they remain trapped in the sweltering, lethal heat.
A phone screen glows, displaying a name, Brother High, as an attempt to reach out fails. The connection is dead, leaving the caller in total isolation as the situation rapidly deteriorates.
With a steady hand, Ethan brandishes his firearm. He remains cool and calculated, prepared to defend his sanctuary at all costs from anyone foolish enough to try and break in. Ethan sits amidst the chaos, holding signs that mock the desperation of the outside world. While others face a fiery doom, he remains firmly in control within his climate-controlled bunker. The world is a landscape of flames, but Ethan is untouchable. He monitors the global collapse from his secure base, sipping a drink while the rest of humanity faces extinction. The lunar catastrophe has pushed temperatures to a boiling point. The ground itself has become a lethal surface, turning the city into a literal oven that claims lives by the second. A man collapses on the scorching pavement, his body ravaged by extreme heat. Emergency broadcasts blare out, warning everyone to stay inside to avoid horrific, life-ending skin and respiratory burns. The city's power center stands vulnerable as the heat intensifies. Electrical surges flicker through the facility, signaling that the last bastion of infrastructure is about to reach its breaking point. Sparks fly as the facility begins to overload. The massive transformers groan under the pressure, unable to withstand the apocalyptic conditions as the city's power grid prepares for total collapse. A blinding explosion tears through the power station. The massive facility detonates, plunging the city into complete darkness and cutting off the last hope for any surviving, desperate urban residents. The line goes dead, leaving only the sound of a hollow dial tone. With the power grid destroyed, communication is officially severed, sealing the grim fate of those left outside. The phone rings, but the contact is dead. The group realizes their connection to the outside world is gone, and the heat is becoming absolutely unbearable. In the sweltering suite, the luxury of a private pool mocks them as the air conditioner fails and the room turns into a literal death trap.
Tensions rise as the group struggles with the reality of their living situation. Privacy is a luxury they no longer have in this collapsing city. Frustration boils over. They demand separation, desperately trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy while the heat begins to overwhelm their limited, shared space. Suddenly, the lights flicker and die. The building plunges into darkness, signaling a total power failure that leaves the survivors trapped in the stifling, silent heat. Panic sets in. Without electricity, the cooling systems are dead, and the group realizes they are completely cut off from the grid during this extreme weather. The temperature is spiking at an alarming rate. Sweat-drenched and desperate, they know that staying in this room any longer is a death sentence for them all. The mercury is climbing well past 40 degrees. They shed their clothes, gasping for air, realizing they need a new plan if they want to survive the night. The leader stares into the abyss of their failure. They need a solution, and they need it fast, before the heat claims them as its next victims. A dark idea forms. Remembering Ethan's presidential suite and its private pool, the group sets their sights on a hostile takeover to secure their own survival. The past comes back to haunt them. Poor maintenance on the city's electrical grid has left them vulnerable, and now they must pay the price for that neglect. While they plot, Ethan remains elsewhere, seemingly unbothered, sipping wine and focusing on his own needs, oblivious to the desperate scavengers coming for his sanctuary. The city's power grid has completely collapsed under the extreme heat, leaving the desperate populace scrambling as the infrastructure that once sustained them finally fails. With the grid down, everyone connected to the municipal system is suffering. Ethan, however, remains cool and collected, safely tucked away in his private sanctuary.
Ethan reflects on his foresight. Choosing a premium suite equipped with its own private pool was the ultimate power move to survive this scorching apocalypse. He steps out of the refreshing water, feeling untouchable while the rest of the world burns. His preparation has truly paid off in this new, brutal era. It wasn't just the pool. Ethan installed industrial air conditioning units and massive battery backups to ensure his personal environment stays perfectly chilled despite the heat. Thinking it still isn't quite cold enough, Ethan decides to enhance his room's climate control even further by adding blocks of ice to the mix. He places large, freezing blocks of ice strategically around the room, creating a mini glacier to combat the oppressive, sweltering temperatures outside his front door. The room is now a blissful, chilly oasis. Ethan breathes a sigh of relief as the air conditioners hum, keeping his temperature-controlled paradise perfectly comfortable. Sipping on a drink, Ethan lounges in his suite, completely isolated from the misery outside. He is living like a king while the city slowly suffocates. Elsewhere, a desperate group led by a man named Big Bro struggles to find shelter, realizing that all the other hotel rooms are already fully booked.
While chaos consumes the world outside, Ethan remains unfazed, manifesting a lavish spread of gourmet food out of thin air to enjoy a quiet, surreal meal. A feast of crab, dumplings, and various delicacies materializes before his eyes. Ethan prepares to dine, completely detached from the global catastrophe unfolding just beyond his walls. Ethan calmly sits down, treating the start of the end times as nothing more than a casual opportunity to enjoy a simple, well-deserved breakfast in total peace. He clicks his chopsticks together, savoring the moment. With his supplies secured, he has the luxury of time, while others scramble for their very survival elsewhere. As he lifts a piece of meat, Ethan muses on the fate of his enemies, specifically wondering when the opportunist Chiang will finally face his inevitable reckoning. The focus shifts as a frantic, muffled pounding echoes against his reinforced door. Someone is desperate to get inside, unaware of the cold reality awaiting them. A voice screams for Ethan to open up, insisting they know he is hiding inside. The intrusion attempts intensify, shattering the silence of his private sanctuary. Ethan barely flinches at the noise. He remains unbothered, watching as the heavy door begins to buckle under the pressure of the desperate soul trying to force entry. A cooling mist spills out as the door finally swings open, revealing a hidden sanctuary of climate-controlled air that hits the desperate, sweating crowd like a miracle. The intruders are visibly shaken, their faces contorted with a mix of exhaustion and raw greed as they struggle to process the sudden relief from the scorching heat. Ethan stands unfazed in the doorway, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the chaotic energy of the mob, as he coolly questions their uninvited presence in his space. The group stares at Ethan in disbelief, stunned to find him perfectly composed and relaxed, while they have been fighting for their lives in the brutal outside world.
One man loses all composure, frantically pointing out the luxuries inside. He can't believe his eyes. Electricity, food, and even a pool in the middle of this apocalypse. The group's eyes widen as they peer into the room, their envy skyrocketing at the sight of air-conditioned comfort, which feels like a treasure trove of survival resources. A woman screams, accusing Ethan of hoarding his resources while others suffer in the blistering heat. She demands he vacate the room immediately, fueled by pure, jealous rage. The crowd descends into a frenzy of entitlement, pushing forward to seize control of the room. They see Ethan's peace as a personal insult to their own desperate struggle. The intruders won't take no for an answer, demanding Ethan surrender his supplies and room as payment for old debts. They are ready to use force. A massive, sweat-drenched man pushes his way forward, physically forcing his way through the doorway to breach Ethan's sanctuary and claim the resources within for himself. With a threatening ultimatum, the aggressor kicks his way into the room, determined to physically eject Ethan and seize control of the climate-controlled haven by any means necessary. Inside the sanctuary, the group is stunned by the sheer abundance of food, their greed and jealousy peaking
as they realize just how much Ethan has been hoarding. The intruder lunges forward with violent intent, but Ethan is no longer the man he once was. He prepares to unleash a swift, lethal counterattack against the mob. A powerful, focused strike cuts through the air, moving with blinding speed to dismantle the threat before the intruders can even process the sudden shift in power. The strike hits with absolute precision, leaving a trail of energy that signals Ethan's intent to end this confrontation permanently, rather than negotiate with those who prey on him.
The aggressor's eyes widen in sheer terror as he realizes he has severely underestimated Ethan, whose lethal response has instantly turned the tables on the entire raiding party. Ethan stands his ground, his hand steady as he aims his firearm, warning the intruders that one more step toward him will be their final mistake. With his weapon drawn and his eyes cold, Ethan makes it clear that he isn't playing games anymore. The atmosphere in the room shifts instantly into lethal territory. The intruders freeze, their bravado shattered. They stare in disbelief at the weapon in Ethan's hand, completely stunned that he actually possesses such a powerful piece of equipment. Panic sets in as the mob realizes the man they tried to bully is armed. They question where Ethan could have possibly scavenged a real firearm in this apocalypse. The injured man on the ground gasps, stunned that Ethan is actually capable of holding a gun. The realization of their massive tactical miscalculation hits them all at once. The tension is suffocating. As Ethan maintains his aim, the realization of his hidden strength and resources leaves the intruders trembling and paralyzed by their sudden, deadly fear. The intruders are visibly shaken, their faces pale with shock. The weight of their mistake hits home as they stare down the barrel, knowing they have crossed a line. With a sharp exhale, Ethan reaffirms his dominance. The smoking barrel of his gun serves as a grim reminder that he is no longer the target. He is the hunter. The intruders are caught completely off guard, their aggressive confidence shattering into pure, raw panic as Ethan reveals the lethal power he holds in his hand. One of the thugs collapses, clutching his wounded leg in agony, while his terrified companions realize that Ethan is no longer the target, but the judge and jury. Ethan holds all the cards now, his voice cold and commanding as he demands they vacate his property immediately, leaving them no room to negotiate or resist. With his weapon leveled firmly, Ethan stares down his former tormentors, his calm demeanor serving as a chilling reminder that he is prepared to finish this right now. The atmosphere thickens with dread as Ethan begins a slow, deliberate countdown, giving the intruders a final, fleeting chance to escape his lethal retribution while they still can. Ethan's eyes are locked onto his targets, his expression devoid of mercy. He reaches the start of his count, the gravity of the moment pinning them to the spot. As the countdown ticks forward, Ethan remains steady, his finger light on the trigger. The intruders are frozen, knowing that his patience is rapidly reaching its final, deadly end. Without a flicker of hesitation, Ethan fires again, proving that his ultimatum was not a bluff. The room erupts in chaos as the survivors realize their time has expired. The thugs are terrified, scrambling to appease their leader after Ethan's ruthless display of force shattered their confidence and left them trembling in the cold light of reality. But pressure mounts for the staff as a massive banquet order threatens to deplete their remaining supplies, leaving them desperate for the overdue deliveries that were supposed to arrive. The ruthless boss, Su Chen, demands that every scrap of food and water be brought to him, indifferent to the suffering of the starving people surrounding his lavish quarters. With the supplies secured, Su Chen carelessly spills water, a precious commodity in this wasteland, showcasing his total disregard for the basic survival needs of the desperate group nearby. Tensions boil over as the survivors confront the blatant hoarding, arguing that their survival is being systematically crushed by those who prioritize power and money over human life itself.
The survivors demand equality, questioning why resources aren't being shared. The boss coldly dismisses their pleas, threatening to violently discard anyone who dares to voice their dissent against him.
The crowd descends into pure, unadulterated chaos as the boss turns his aggression toward the defenseless, sparking a frantic, desperate struggle for safety in the face of his violence. Amidst the panicked screams, the survivors realize that Su Chen has crossed the line into murder, turning the facility into a terrifying death trap for everyone trapped inside. The tension in the facility is reaching a breaking point as the survivors lock eyes with the men who seem to be calling all the shots. Whispers spread like wildfire through the sweltering crowd. Rumors of a luxurious hideout upstairs, complete with amenities that feel like a fever dream, ignite their desperation. The gossip is relentless. Word is that Su Chen is living in absolute decadence. Chilled drinks, air conditioning, and even a pool, while everyone else rots away. The realization hits the survivors hard. The disparity between their suffering and the rumored comfort upstairs creates a volatile mix of envy and raw, unfiltered anger. The crowd demands answers, questioning if the rumors are real or just another cruel joke. They are tired of the uncertainty and hungry for a change. One survivor swears on their life that the paradise is real, describing the fried chicken and ice cubes with such detail that it drives the starving masses wild. The mob mentality takes over. Why should they suffer in this sauna while someone else lives in luxury? They decide it's time to storm the upper levels and seize it. The leaders watch the chaos unfold with cold indifference, essentially giving their thugs the green light to handle the uprising with whatever brutal force they see fit.
The desperate mob rallies behind their leader Chiang, convinced that they can break through Su Chen's defenses and claim the resources they believe are rightfully theirs. A mysterious, chilling presence greets the intruders at the threshold. The air crackles with tension as the survivors confront the unexpected reality of what lies behind the door. The desperate group attempts to plead their case to the cold, imposing figure standing in the doorway, hoping to charm their way into the sanctuary of the cooling room. The starving crowd desperately tries to justify their intrusion, babbling about the unbearable heat and the emergency, while their eyes fixate on the sweet, life-saving air conditioning inside. The survivors resort to manipulative tactics, playing the card of respect for elders and care for the young, to guilt-trip their way into the heavily fortified and chilled space. The group's greed is laid bare when they catch a glimpse of something far more precious than cool air, a basket of golden, crispy fried chicken sitting inside. The sight of the steaming, delicious food breaks the last shred of the intruders' composure, causing a collective, frenzied reaction as their hunger overrides any remaining sense of caution. The sight of the fried chicken triggers a chaotic outburst. The sight of the feast turns the desperate mob into a ravenous pack, screaming for their prize amidst the apocalypse. The starving boy launches himself like a wild animal, his eyes wide with a desperate, frantic hunger as he lunges toward the prized food supplies. A heavy, bare foot slams onto the floor, cutting off the boy's path with a sharp, decisive strike that echoes through the tense room. The boy is sent spiraling backward in midair, his momentum completely shattered by the sudden, brutal intervention that caught him off guard. The mob erupts in horror as their comrade is shoved aside. A woman screams for her son, her face twisted in pure, unadulterated panic.
Ethan stands firm, his voice cold and commanding. He warns the group to restrain their unruly members or face the consequences of his iron-fisted justice. Ethan remains completely unfazed. He watches the chaos with a stoic, icy glare, radiating a sense of calm that contrasts sharply with the frantic mob. The crowd turns their vitriol toward Ethan, branding him a murderer and crying out in defense of the boy, fueled by their collective rage. The mob's desperation turns into a unified threat. They demand Ethan be evicted from the room, hoping to seize his resources for their own survival. The desperate mob ignores Ethan's warning, foolishly believing that their sheer numbers can overwhelm him. They surge forward, blinded by greed and their hunger for his supplies. Ethan doesn't hesitate. With surgical precision, he unleashes a hidden weapon, striking his primary aggressor with lethal intent as the rest of the group blindly closes the distance. The projectile pierces through the man's neck with terrifying force,
silencing his shouts instantly. Ethan's cold resolve turns this chaotic confrontation into a brutal display of absolute dominance. As the life drains from his target, Ethan stands unmoved. The surrounding mob watches in sheer horror, their reckless aggression vanishing the moment they realize they've challenged a monster. The remaining survivors freeze, their bravado shattered. One man stares at his fallen comrade, the gravity of Ethan's lethal efficiency finally sinking in. The room falls deathly silent. With a sickening thud, the body collapses to the floor. The mob members scramble back, terrified, suddenly realizing that Ethan is not a victim, but a dangerous, unstoppable predator. Ethan stands amidst the trembling group, his aura radiating lethal authority. The message is clear. Those who dare to cross him will pay the ultimate price for their insolence. Ethan levels his weapon at the cowering crowd. He coldly reminds them that while he may be outnumbered, they only have one life to lose in this unforgiving apocalypse.
With the threat neutralized, Ethan stands tall, his presence radiating an aura of absolute dominance that leaves the surviving onlookers trembling in the wake of his cold, calculated violence.
A frantic cry echoes across the sweltering hotel complex, calling out for their missing companion in sheer distress. Inside the hotel, tempers flare as the survivors struggle against the relentless heat wave and grim reality. One enraged survivor screams at the group, furiously demanding to know why his brother was left outside to suffer. Others desperately restrain the distraught man, forcing him to face the brutal truth that his brother is already dead. Nearby lies the lifeless body of Hai, his flesh terribly scorched and blistered by the unrelenting apocalypse. Lacking any medical supplies, the severe infection combined with the extreme heat proved fatal for the fallen survivor. Consuming himself with sheer grief and blinding hatred, the distraught man turns his fury directly towards Su Chen. With tensions reaching a boiling point, the men brace themselves as chaos threatens to erupt within the sanctuary. Outside the door, desperate pleas echo down the hallway as the survivors foolishly convince themselves that Ethan was merely bluffing when he threatened them. Watching through his security camera, Ethan listens to their pathetic attempts at manipulation, completely unfazed by their shameless declarations of affection. Drenched in sweat under the suffocating heat wave, the women beg for mercy, offering complete devotion just to step inside his cool sanctuary. They shamelessly continue bartering their bodies, promising to do whatever he wants if he only grants them access to the air-conditioned suite. Smirking at their willingness to sell themselves out, Ethan coolly approaches the heavy glass door and mockingly invites them to step inside. As the heavy door glides open, Ethan stands calmly before the crowd, displaying total confidence despite the chaos unfolding right in front of him. The women's faces light up with ecstatic joy and relief, foolishly believing that their desperate emotional pleas actually managed to win them over.
While the women loudly shower him with praise, a furious thug roars from behind, shoving past them with clear murder in his eyes. Blinded by intense rage, the manic attacker rushes forward, aiming to butcher Ethan on the spot and take over his cooled room by force. Unbeknownst to the aggressive mob, Ethan's sanctuary is armed with lethal automated defenses, ready to slaughter anyone who dares cross the threshold. As the crazed man swings his weapon with lethal intent, Ethan effortlessly raises his hand, remaining completely unfazed by the incoming assault. With explosive speed and crushing power, Ethan counters the attack, slamming the ruthless thug straight into the ground in a single brutal strike. Ethan slams the aggressive attacker down with overwhelming force, sending him crashing violently into the floor. The man collapses painfully into the group of stunned women, completely incapacitated by the single brutal blow. Standing at his doorway, Ethan calmly asks if anyone else wants to try forcing their way inside. The terrified women back away in horror, quickly agreeing that staying outside in the heat is far safer. With a dark, intimidating aura surrounding him, Ethan coldly orders the frightened group to get lost.
Glaring at them with utter disdain, Ethan prepares to close his door and shut out the miserable crowd. Down the hallway, terrified survivors flee for their lives, frantically trying to stick together. Meanwhile, an enraged survivor seethes with venomous malice, blaming Su Chen for ruining their chances at survival. Outside the hotel, a heavy armored vehicle equipped with reinforced plating slowly approaches the entrance. Its heavy tank treads grind over the scorched ground, immediately catching the attention of the desperate survivors inside. Seeing the insulated windows and modified tracks, the hopeless crowd mistakenly assumes a military rescue team has arrived. As the armored behemoth comes to a halt at the front doors, overjoyed survivors celebrate their supposed salvation.
Armed soldiers in full environmental suits step out from the armored vehicle, demanding to know if the key scientist, Dr. Lewis, is among them. With high-powered rifles held at the ready, the heavily geared guards make it clear that this operation is strictly high-priority business. As Dr. Lewis steps forward, the soldiers immediately present him with a specialized thermal suit, urging him to evacuate without delay. Outraged, the surrounding survivors shout in disbelief, suddenly realizing that this official rescue team is only here for a single person. The squad leader tries to soothe the angry crowd, claiming government relief operations will arrive later during the cooler hours of the night. Meanwhile, Ethan quietly observes the entire tense encounter from his vantage point, keeping his weapon ready should chaos break out below. The gullible crowd erupts in joyful cheers, stupidly clinging to the false hope that official help will soon return to save them all. Suddenly, the arrogant billionaire's son screams out, offering an astronomical fortune just to secure one of the heat-resistant suits for himself. Overcome by greed and panic, Sun lunges recklessly toward the guards, desperate to snatch a life-saving suit right out of their hands. The soldier firmly repels the desperate billionaire, explaining that Dr. Lewis's geological expertise is indispensable for humanity's survival during this apocalypse. Enraged by the rejection, Sun grabs onto the guard and screams at his muscle-bound enforcer, Gao, to forcefully take the suits. The soldiers immediately raise their assault rifles at Gao and his thugs, forcing the criminals to back off as the squad prepares to retreat. Desperate to turn the military against Ethan, a hysterical survivor shouts for the retreating soldiers to stop, claiming a ruthless killer resides upstairs. She grabs a soldier's arm, wildly warning him that the man in the penthouse poses an immediate lethal threat to everyone present.
Her companion chimed in, falsely testifying that the armed killer had just executed multiple innocent people and nearly wiped them all out. Sweltering heat continues to choke the lobby, pushing the desperate crowd closer to complete madness as sweat pours down their faces. Hearing of an armed killer, a hot-headed young soldier decides to stay behind, despite his commander urging him not to act impulsively. Removing his helmet, Caleb insists on exercising his own discretion, telling his squad to head back while he handles the gunmen upstairs. Determined to deliver justice himself, the rogue soldier vows to unmask and eliminate the dangerous murderer hiding above. Rifle in hand, Caleb prepares to ascend the stairs, fueled by righteous anger and oblivious to the manipulative trap being set. Step by heavy step, the young soldier marches up toward the penthouse, fully intent on confronting Ethan face to face. Watching him go, Tanya sneers with malicious delight, calculating that once Ethan is eliminated, his air-conditioned sanctuary will belong to her. Her twisted plan hinges on the naive soldier eliminating her arch-rival, granting her free access to all of Ethan's luxurious supplies. The footsteps echo through the empty corridor as Caleb steadily closes in on Ethan's heavily fortified sanctuary. Stepping carefully down the quiet corridor toward the penthouse, Caleb keeps his guard up, completely unaware of the lethal defensive traps awaiting him around the corner. Meanwhile, static-filled emergency broadcasts echo through the airwaves, directing desperate survivors to assemble at Valley Park for an upcoming morning military rescue operation. Suddenly spotting something unusual concealed near the floor, Caleb freezes in his tracks as he realizes a hidden surveillance camera is tracking his exact movements. Inside a nearby potted plant,
The lens swivels directly onto him, just as Ethan's heavily fortified front door unlatches and cracks open from the inside.
Before Caleb can even raise his rifle to aim, an anonymous hand reaches out through the small gap and tosses a heavy tactical canister rolling across the hallway floor. The metallic canister skitters across the carpet directly toward the unsuspecting soldier, leaving him barely a second to react to the incoming explosive threat. Tensing up with his rifle ready, Caleb stares down in utter shock as he instantly recognizes the deadly device bouncing right at his feet. Cursing under his breath, Caleb tries to shield his eyes, but a blinding, overwhelming flash instantly detonates and floods the hallway with intense white light. The brutal flashbang leaves Caleb completely disoriented and blinded, severely compromising his vision and stance in the middle of the narrow, exposed corridor. To make matters worse, 2 tear gas canisters are immediately dropped at his boots, rapidly filling the enclosed space with dense, suffocating white smoke. Coughing helplessly as the acrid chemical fumes surround him, Caleb realizes with growing dread that he has walked straight into a masterfully orchestrated ambush. Downstairs, the hysterical crowd continues egging on the situation, completely unaware that the military officer they manipulated has already been utterly neutralized above. Creeping up through the thick tear gas, Ethan raises a heavy bat behind the choking Caleb, preparing to deliver a swift strike. Blinded and wheezing from the noxious fumes, Caleb realizes he is caught in a deadly trap and desperately attempts to retreat. Before the soldier can take another step, Ethan swings his weapon through the haze with swift and brutal precision. The heavy blow connects forcefully, knocking Caleb unconscious before he can raise his rifle or call out for help. Moments later, Caleb slowly drifts back to consciousness, his eyes stinging severely as his blurry vision begins to settle. He finds himself inside an astonishingly cool room, catching sight of Ethan casually examining his military credentials and assault rifle.
Holding Caleb's high-powered weapon, Ethan coolly greets his captive and announces that it is finally time for an interrogation. Stripped and bound securely to a chair between chilling ice blocks, Caleb demands to know Ethan's true identity and how he survived. Astonished by his captor's luxury setup, the bound soldier questions how a civilian managed to obtain tactical flashbangs and military weapons. Ethan playfully spins an absurd story about finding the gear, leaving his tied-up prisoner completely bewildered and utterly disbelieving. Ethan holds a captive at gunpoint, forcing him to spill the truth about the government's desperate, flawed plan for the upcoming morning. The prisoner is stunned by Ethan's cryptic foresight, realizing this man knows far too much about the events that are about to unfold. Ethan reveals that his knowledge comes from a previous life, catching the prisoner completely off guard with his chilling and impossible claim. Ethan explains the lethal danger of the moonlight, which drains human life in minutes, leaving survivors with no choice but to brave the cold. He details how the government's inability to adapt rescue vehicles forces citizens to travel to safe zones on their own, risking certain death. Ethan offers a tactical survival tip, suggesting that thick blankets and heavy layers are essential for insulating against the deadly, freezing night air. The tied-up man stares on in disbelief as Ethan continues to break down the brutal reality of their dire situation during the apocalypse. Ethan emphasizes that even minor precautions, like wrapping up correctly, could drastically increase the survival rate for those forced to face the harsh elements. The captive looks on in sheer disbelief as Ethan presses forward with his interrogation, demanding answers about the impending apocalyptic threats and the survival secrets he holds. The captive stammers, trying to process the lethal reality Ethan is presenting. The tension in the room is palpable as the life or death stakes continue to escalate rapidly. Ethan doesn't hesitate, aiming his weapon directly at the man's head. The silent threat looms large, forcing the captive to realize that his time is running out fast. Desperate to save his skin, the captive begs for his life, offering up crucial information about using thick blankets as a shield against the deadly moonlight phenomenon. The captive frantically promises to use his walkie-talkie only for relaying this life-saving survival intel, swearing he won't call for any backup to challenge Ethan's authority. With a swift, precise movement, Ethan slices through the ropes, setting the captive free. The blade flashes, leaving no doubt about who is truly in control here. Freed from his bindings, the captive stares in confusion at his surroundings, still reeling from the narrow escape and the intense pressure of Ethan's cold, calculated interrogation. Ethan delivers a stern final warning. He respects the man's usefulness for survival, but makes it clear that any further defiance will be met with absolute, lethal force. Ethan remains stone cold, ignoring the captive's desperate plea about calling for backup. Instead, he coolly directs the man's attention toward the ceiling to reveal a lethal surprise waiting above. The man stares in terror as Ethan unveils a sophisticated surveillance turret, fully equipped with facial recognition and heavy-duty machine guns, leaving him completely speechless at the overwhelming firepower. The automated system locks onto its target, its sensors glowing with hostile intent. Ethan makes it clear that once this beast activates, he is the only one walking away alive. With a swift, calculated motion, Ethan finishes his preparations, leaving the captive in a state of shock as the reality of his imminent, lopsided demise settles into his trembling bones. Ethan reminds his captive that he has far more pressing matters than killing him. He leaves the man physically intact, but mentally shattered by the display of pure, high-tech dominance. Accepting his fate, the man nods in total, terrified submission. He realizes that resisting Ethan is not just futile, it is an invitation to a swift and brutal end today. The man sits in stunned silence, clutching his chest as the adrenaline fades. He is physically unharmed, but the psychological toll of staring down the barrel of death remains heavy. As the dust settles, onlookers whisper in confusion. They cannot fathom why Ethan spared the man, noting that he only shared the secret of the blankets, keeping the carnage hidden.
The atmosphere is thick with disbelief as onlookers scramble to understand how Ethan managed to strip the armed soldier of his lethal weaponry so effortlessly. Doubts plague the surrounding survivors. They struggle to comprehend the sheer strength Ethan displayed, leaving them questioning if any ordinary soldier could ever stand a chance. Gao, the aggressive ringleader, is absolutely livid. His face contorts in rage, his frustration boiling over as he processes the humiliating turn of events. Turning his blind fury toward his own subordinate, Gao demands answers, screaming at his lackey for failing to intervene when the critical moment presented itself. Without hesitation, Gao lashes out, delivering a brutal strike to his subordinate, his anger manifesting in a violent display of dominance over his own crew. The scene shifts to Ethan, who remains calm and detached, casually remarking about the origin of his resources, seemingly unfazed by the chaos unfolding around him. As the lackey is kicked away, a frustrated henchman steps forward, demanding to know how much longer they are expected to endure Ethan's overbearing presence. Gao coldly calculates his next move, insisting that despite their hatred, they must keep Ethan close to exploit his connections once the rescue operations finally stabilize. Tensions skyrocket as the survivors reel from the display of force, their eyes wide with disbelief at the shift in power dynamics unfolding before them. Ethan remains unfazed, his focus sharp as he navigates the chaos. He knows that in this new world, resources are the only currency that truly matters. Amidst the encroaching apocalypse and burning skyline, Ethan stands firm, orchestrating his next move, while the desperate remnants of society claw at the shadows. Greed ignites among the onlookers as they catch a glimpse of Ethan's stash. The realization of his supplies turns desperation into a dangerous, covetous obsession.
A desperate survivor screams for violence, urging his cohorts to raid Ethan's room and plunder every last scrap of supplies he has hidden away inside. The man reaches out with greedy hands, his eyes fixated on the promise of riches, completely unaware of the lethal force standing just moments away. Ethan remains cold and unbothered, swiftly pinning the man against the wall with his rifle pressed firmly against his throat, silencing the man's wild demands. A second man, seemingly unfazed by the threat, casually dismisses the violence and tries to pivot the conversation back to a deal with Ethan. A sudden, blinding burst of energy ripples through the air as the group focuses on a mysterious, glowing object, crackling with intense and supernatural power.
The man is captivated by the shimmering crystal, his expression shifting into one of pure ecstasy as he begins to absorb its incredible, otherworldly energy. With trembling hands, he pulls the glowing gem closer, greedily drinking in its power as the light pulsates between his fingers, fueling his dangerous obsession. Euphoria washes over him after days of starvation. He revels in the high, already fantasizing about the unimaginable treasures waiting to be taken from Ethan's room. The survivors are losing their minds, frantically consuming glowing crystals to fuel their greed. They plot to exploit Ethan's resources before ultimately turning on him to claim his sanctuary. The power of the crystals is intoxicating, turning the group into erratic, dangerous aggressors. Tensions flare as they accuse each other of hoarding the precious, energy-filled shards for themselves. A violent confrontation breaks out between the looters. As the energy surges through their veins, their desperate need for control spirals into an unhinged, chaotic brawl for dominance. With a brutal strike, one of the men asserts his physical superiority. The group's fragile alliance shatters as they prioritize immediate violence over their original plan to raid Ethan.
The aggressor looms over his fallen rival, issuing a cold threat. He demands total submission, making it clear that anyone who hides supplies will face a swift and brutal end. Power-hungry and emboldened, the man delivers a crushing blow. The atmosphere is thick with malice as the survivors abandon all restraint, lost in the chaotic high of their newfound strength. A sudden, disorienting vision flashes across the scene, hinting at Alice caught in the crossfire of this escalating madness. The chaos is beginning to spiral far beyond their control. The leader stares into the abyss, his eyes glowing with corrupted power. Reality fades as he fixates on their dwindling supplies, driven to madness by hunger and the volatile crystal energy. Gao, fueled by the volatile power of the glowing crystals, looms over the group, casually mocking the reserved and modest posture of the pink-haired survivor, Duan. Duan remains huddled and guarded. She refuses to succumb to the oppressive heat or Gao's taunting remarks, maintaining her composure while the atmosphere grows increasingly hostile. Duan's icy glare meets Gao's predatory gaze. The tension is thick enough to cut, as he refuses to leave her alone, clearly looking for a fight. Gao's intentions turn dark and predatory. He corners Duan, his voice dripping with twisted amusement, as he demands she join him, signaling a dangerous turn of events. Without warning, Gao lunges forward, his massive hand clamping tightly onto Duan's wrist. She is caught completely off guard by his sudden, aggressive physical escalation. Duan recoils in disgust, shouting at the brute to release her. The physical confrontation escalates, with Gao's strength proving to be an overwhelming threat to her safety. Duan attempts to shove him away, but Gao only tightens his grip, his eyes flashing with a menacing, perverse intent that leaves no room for her to escape.
Gao sneers, his words turning vile as he threatens Tuan with public humiliation. He makes it clear that his cruelty toward her is only just beginning. The atmosphere grows heavy and suffocating as the tension reaches a breaking point. Every ragged breath echoes the rising panic within the room, signaling that disaster is imminent. A sudden, blinding flash cuts through the gloom, momentarily washing out the scene in an intense, ethereal glow that leaves the observers stunned and unable to react. Tuan is cornered, her eyes burning with defiance as Gao openly mocks her, his predatory intentions laid bare in a repulsive, sickening display of total, unadulterated arrogance. The situation turns dire as Gao makes his move, tearing at her clothes. Tuan desperately clutches her shredded garments, fighting to maintain her dignity against his vile assault. Just as things reach a horrific climax, a dark, imposing figure steps in. The room freezes as a commanding voice orders Gao to cease his twisted, shameful behavior immediately. The mysterious interloper doesn't hold back, snapping at Gao with lethal intensity.
He demands to know if the thug even understands the magnitude of the person he's provoking. Gao's face contorts into a mask of pure, unbridled rage. His composure has completely shattered, revealing the pathetic, desperate beast hiding behind his facade of false, hollow strength. The confrontation leaves Gao reeling, his eyes wide with shock and newfound fear, as the power dynamic shifts violently, leaving him exposed and vulnerable in the freezing air. Gao's arrogant display of power comes to a gruesome, abrupt halt. A sharp, lethal strike connects with his neck, leaving him gasping as blood begins to spray everywhere. Panic erupts instantly. As the realization of a murder settles in, the ruthless logic of the apocalypse takes hold. In this lawless chaos, life has become entirely expendable.
Tensions flare as desperate individuals scramble over resources, their eyes wide with fear and greed as they scramble to snatch whatever they can from the floor. A massive, tattooed brute looms over the group, his presence radiating a dangerous, suffocating authority that instantly halts the frantic bickering among the survivors. The giant asserts his dominance, cold and unyielding, declaring that this territory is now under his absolute rule. Comply with his orders or face immediate execution. The man's face is a mask of pure intimidation, his intense, hollow stare drilling into the souls of those trembling before his lethal, newly established law. The scene shifts to a serene, pink-hued room, a stark contrast to the violence downstairs, where the atmosphere remains eerily quiet and undisturbed. Ethan observes the scene from above, his calm demeanor betraying a calculating mind as a worried woman with vibrant pink hair catches his gaze. She stands there, breathing heavily, looking up at Ethan with a mix of apprehension and uncertainty as the gravity of their situation begins to sink in. Ethan speaks with chilling casualness, noting how his influence is already taking root, and ponders how much faster he could push their fates if he chooses. He leans against the railing, detached and composed, watching his plans unfold like a game of chess while the world outside slowly burns to the ground. Below, the two giants exchange a knowing look, sensing the shifting winds of power and wondering if their own moment of opportunity is arriving sooner than expected. Chaos erupts in a blur of movement as someone is struck down, the swift, brutal violence cutting through the silence like a sharp, jagged blade. The camera pans across the sterile, luxury ceiling, signaling a quiet transition as the weight of the previous confrontation lingers heavy in the air. Desperate survivors beg the powerful men for resources, willing to sacrifice their own dignity just to get a small taste of the precious, life-saving ice water. Two women grovel at their feet, eyes wide with terror and longing, pleading for a chance to survive in this brutal, unforgiving new world. Their desperation knows no bounds as they offer to perform any act, no matter how degrading, just to secure a moment of relief from the heat. The man in charge remains unmoved, casually consuming the water while the others look on with a mix of envy, resentment, and cold, calculated hunger. The power dynamic is clear. Those with resources hold the keys to life, and the physical strength on display emphasizes the law of the jungle. He taunts them with his surplus, dangling the promise of survival over their heads, while demanding absolute submission in exchange for the cold drink. With a flick of his wrist, he tosses the container, sending the desperate women into a frantic, chaotic scramble to catch the life-sustaining liquid. The tension rises as the men discuss the rescue point, dismissing the idea of safety, while mocking those who still cling to hope for rescue. A group of muscular, tattooed men exchange cold glances, discussing the fate of their new guests with a chilling lack of empathy or humanity. The squabbling continues as the survivors fight amongst themselves, desperate for even a single drop, while the men watch with cold, detached amusement. A discussion breaks out regarding the group's dwindling supplies, with the men questioning why they are still feeding these supposedly useless, starving refugees. They hatch a cruel plan, deciding to keep the survivors only to use them as expendable cannon fodder for their own future, dangerous schemes.
The final countdown reaches 0, signaling the desperate moment for the survivors to flee their hellish confinement and seek refuge elsewhere.
With the clock striking midnight, the survivors finally muster the courage to break free from their oppressive captors and escape the facility. Exhausted and starving, the women dream of a simple life filled with food and cold drinks once they reach the safety of the rescue point. Their departure is abruptly halted when a lecherous man confronts them, his predatory grin making it clear that they aren't going anywhere just yet. He mocks their plan to leave, reminding them that they owe everything to their captors, and implying that his generosity demands a heavy price. As he forcibly strips away their makeshift protection, the women are left exposed and terrified, realizing their escape attempt has only invited further cruelty. The scene shifts to the harsh, unforgiving pavement, where the scorching heat radiates off the ground, threatening any soul brave enough to step outside. Beneath a brutal, sun-drenched sky, the city stands like an oven, its buildings baking under an unrelenting and lethal heat wave that defines this new world. Draped in thin sheets for protection, a survivor braves the blistering streets, his body slick with sweat as he desperately searches for a way to survive. The survivors lament their starvation, blaming their captors for hoarding supplies and forcing them to risk the lethal heat in search of a better future. The reality of the apocalypse hits hard. Stepping outside feels like walking into an oven, making their desperate trek even more treacherous than they anticipated. A small group of survivors, looking like ghosts under their white sheets, wanders the desolate, heat-warped streets, hoping against all odds to find salvation. Even with makeshift bored souls, the ground is hot enough to burn. Every step is a gamble against the scorching pavement as they push forward into the hellish heat. Panic erupts as the blistering temperature claims another victim. A man collapses, his body seemingly melting under the intense pressure of this apocalyptic, furnace-like environment. There is no time to mourn the fallen. The survivors press on, eyes forward, desperate to reach the sanctuary before the heat claims their own lives as well. A gruesome sight unfolds as the victim's flesh begins to liquefy. The heat is so extreme that it is literally boiling them alive, leaving others to look away in horror. Desperate pleas for help echo through the desolate streets, but they fall on deaf ears. In this world, you either keep moving or you die right where you stand. It is a cold, hard truth. When survival is the only goal, there is no room for compassion. Even the cries of loved ones are drowned out by the heat. One by one, the travelers drop. A hand reaches out in a final, futile gesture, begging for assistance that no one in this nightmare is willing to provide. Two massive, heat-ravaged brutes stand in the way. Their bodies are glowing, mutated by the relentless temperatures into something monstrous, guarding the path forward with terrifying power. A guttural, monstrous roar pierces the air. The creature's glowing red eyes lock onto the survivors, signaling that the final stretch of their journey will be the most deadly. Ethan recalls his past life, remembering the heavy toll this short kilometer demanded. Without proper protection, the path to the rescue point is paved with the bodies of the dead. Ethan surveys the scene from the balcony, his cold, calculated expression hinting that he's already orchestrating his next move amidst the growing chaos of the surrounding survivors. A desperate voice cries out, begging for the leader to wait. But the atmosphere remains tense as the group struggles to keep pace in the sweltering, lethal heat. Arguments flare up between the exhausted travelers, with sharp words and petty bickering revealing the fraying nerves of those trying to survive this endless, scorching nightmare. A sinister man attempts to lure two frightened women away, offering a false sense of security, while his true, predatory intentions remain hidden behind a thin, mocking smile. As the tension mounts, a hand reaches out, and the focus shifts to the tattered, makeshift protection covering their legs,
highlighting the brutal reality of their desperate journey. The man continues his cruel taunting, mocking the women's fear and paranoia, completely unaware of the monstrous danger lurking just beyond their immediate, suffocating line of sight. The silence is shattered as a massive, clawed hand bursts through the reinforced glass, signaling the arrival of a nightmare that none of them were prepared to face. Glass shards rain down as the terrifying creature pulls itself forward, its monstrous strength easily overcoming the flimsy barriers the survivors once relied upon for their protection. Emerging from the ruins, two hulking, heat-ravaged monstrosities step into the light, their glowing red eyes locked onto the terrified group as they prepare for a brutal assault. The air crackles with sudden violence as the creatures move with lethal speed, leaving the survivors stunned by the sheer, overwhelming power of these mutated, nightmarish pursuers. Panic erupts in an instant. The survivors scramble in terror, their voices trembling as they finally comprehend the lethal threat that has been stalking them through the heat. The realization hits with horrific clarity. The monsters have arrived, and as the group screams in terror, it becomes clear that survival is no longer guaranteed for anyone. As terrifying, magma-like claws descend from above, the terrified survivors panic, desperate to know if these scorching entities carry a lethal, zombifying infection that spells their doom. Amidst the chaos, a cold-blooded leader taunts his trembling underlings, cruelly inviting them to test the monster's lethality for themselves, rather than cowering in fear of the unknown.
The situation spirals into absolute horror as the sheer, blistering heat radiating from the encroaching monstrosities becomes physically unbearable, forcing the group to face their agonizing, fiery end. A survivor is seized by the searing, hulking beast, his body literally frying under the creature's touch as the group watches in paralyzed, blood-curdling fear of the nightmare. The survivors scramble to check on their leader, their voices thick with panic as the reality of the lethal, heat-based threat begins to tear their fragile group apart. The men recoil in shock, hyper-aware that the creature's immense body temperature is far beyond anything human, confirming that these aren't just monsters, they are walking furnaces of death. With firm, decisive steps, a newcomer strides toward the center of the carnage, his calm demeanor cutting through the panic of the cowering men as he steps up. Brandishing a sharp blade, the mysterious warrior commands the group to clear the way, signaling his intent to engage the deadly, superheated abominations head-on without any hesitation. The massive, flaming entities loom over the scene, their glowing eyes fixed on the group as the tension reaches a breaking point in the face of certain destruction. The onlookers watch in disbelief, questioning the sanity of the man who dares to challenge these terrifying, fire-infused nightmares, while they can only stand by and watch. Seeing an opportunity to exploit the chaos, the ruthless leader schemes to let the stranger weaken the monsters before betraying him to claim his hard-earned victory. A grim truth is revealed. The sun-drenched corpses aren't traditional zombies, but something far worse, mutated horrors that rely on heat rather than viral transmission to destroy the living. Ethan stands his ground, his blade ready as the heat-radiating monstrosities close in from both sides, threatening to incinerate everything in their path. Drawing from ancient myths, Ethan identifies these scorched horrors as drought demons, creatures of legend brought to life by the relentless apocalypse.
With eyes locked on his targets, Ethan prepares to strike, fully aware of the lethal danger these fire-wielding beasts pose to his survival. Ethan pauses to acknowledge his supporters, clutching a sign that serves as a reminder of the community backing him through this hellish nightmare. High above the chaos, Ethan surveys the burning world, fueled by his cold determination to hoard resources and outlast the crumbling society below. A deafening roar tears through the air as the massive, mutated creature loses its composure, signaling an imminent and brutal confrontation. The drought demons unleash their full fury, but Ethan remains unfazed, analyzing their movements while preparing to cut through their scorching defenses.
Ethan reflects on the past life, realizing that lingering attachments often transform the deceased into vengeful entities known as drought demons after their brutal ends. The cycle of hatred continues as Ethan observes the monstrous transformation of the fallen, acknowledging that the victims of yesterday have become the nightmares of today. The enraged creature lunges at Ethan, its burning, monstrous form fueled by the memory of its previous death at his hands. Ethan holds his ground, his blade ready, as the monstrous foe charges in a desperate, fiery display of pure, unadulterated malice. With a calm, calculated focus, Ethan prepares to exploit a momentary opening in the beast's aggressive, mindless onslaught. A violent collision ensues. Ethan strikes with lethal precision, his blade cutting through the chaos as he faces the creature's full, burning fury. The final moment arrives in a blinding flash of power, signaling a definitive end to the confrontation between the survivor and the vengeful demon. A clean, vertical strike bisects the creature, leaving its glowing, hateful eyes wide with the realization that its second life has come to a swift conclusion. The battlefield crackles with tension as Ethan identifies the rare crystal nucleus, a prize capable of granting a superhuman physique to anyone who claims it. Before Ethan can secure the treasure, a monstrous entity lunges forward, roaring with primal possessiveness. It demands the crystal, unwilling to let the human claim its power. With a swift, calculated motion, Ethan delivers a devastating blow, sending the creature spiraling. He leaves the reeling monster to his allies, turning his back on the chaos. Ethan strides away, indifferent to the brawl behind him. Meanwhile, a frustrated leader screams at his fallen subordinate, demanding the useless man get back into the fight. The scene erupts into total carnage as the enraged monster unleashes its fury, brutally pummeling the struggling survivors, who are left to deal with the aftermath of Ethan's departure.
The group desperately shouts commands, lunging toward their target in a frantic attempt to seize the weapon, but their efforts are met with a brutal, crushing display of overwhelming power. The monster retaliates with savage force, obliterating the attackers in a singular, explosive strike that leaves nothing but chaos and carnage in its wake. As the dust settles, a rare and precious prize is revealed, a glowing crystal nucleus, a treasure hidden within the skulls of the most dangerous, mutated beasts. Ethan prepares his discovery with meticulous care, dropping the shimmering, rare crystal into a glass of liquid, ready to harness the potent energy contained within. With a cold, calculated gaze, Ethan follows the essential ritual. Clean the nucleus thoroughly, and prepare to swallow it to unlock its dormant, world-altering potential. Without hesitation, he consumes the crystal, trusting the process to initiate the dangerous transformation required to survive this harsh, unforgiving apocalypse. Agony rips through his body as the raw, volatile energy of the nucleus ignites his veins, forcing a painful but necessary evolution of his physical form. The power surges outward, enveloping Ethan in a violent shroud of shadow and flame, marking his ascent as he successfully integrates the core's immense, newfound strength. Ethan's body undergoes a violent, searing metamorphosis. Veins bulge and his eyes glow with a terrifying, otherworldly intensity as he pushes his physical limits to reach a new plateau. Energy surges through Ethan, ripping through his muscles with raw power. He stands amidst the destruction, his body now resonating with the potent strength he has successfully forcibly integrated. With a deafening crack, the atmosphere itself seems to buckle under the weight of Ethan's newfound aura, signaling that his evolution into a far more dangerous survivor is complete. Elsewhere, a desperate group panics as their water supply runs dry. Led by the aggressive Dao, the men scramble, realizing their survival in the harsh wasteland is rapidly fading.
Dao corners a woman, threatening her with brutal violence. Desperate to escape, she offers him a treacherous deal. She knows exactly how to help him ambush their rival, Su Chen. The woman reveals that by targeting Su Chen's fiancé, Jiang, they can lure him out. Dao, intrigued by this malicious plan, demands she spill every detail or face his wrath. Li Na,
watching the exchange, agrees to the scheme. However, survival in this hellscape comes at a cost, and she demands a heavy price for her betrayal of Su Chen. Li Na insists on being fed before betraying Su Chen, craving fresh meat. Dao scoffs at her demand, noting that the remaining food supply has long since started to rot. The twisted leader Dao looms over the captives, his eyes cold as he offers them a horrific, unthinkable choice for survival in this starving wasteland. Dao forces the decision upon them, presenting a blade while his henchmen hold the terrified girl firmly in place, waiting for the inevitable psychological collapse. Horror dawns on the woman's face as she realizes the true, gruesome nature of the meat Dao is forcing them to consider for their next meal. A sharp kitchen knife is brandished, flashing under the dim light as the tension reaches a breaking point and the threat of violence becomes immediate. Panic erupts as the victim screams in terror, begging the wielder of the blade to stop, desperate to escape the nightmare that has trapped them. The victim desperately pleads with her own sister, Chen, hoping that blood ties might be enough to stop her from carrying out this unthinkable, murderous act. Chen, now fully under the influence of the darkness, coldly rejects their sisterhood, her eyes glowing with a sinister, inhuman intent that chills the room. The tension boils over as a sharp blade flashes. The victim screams, accusing their attacker of heartlessly planning to use them as nothing more than disposable bait for survival.
Chaos erupts in the cramped room. The assailant, eyes wild with mania, rejects any responsibility for the horrific situation, cruelly dismissing the victim's pain with a cold, hollow laugh. The cruel laughter echoes. The captors stand by, sweat-drenched and detached, mocking the victim's desperate pleas and shifting the blame entirely onto them for their own miserable, inevitable fate. The victim collapses in a pool of blood. The attacker stands over them, laughing maniacally, seemingly unbothered by the brutal violence that has just unfolded before their very eyes. The twisted woman looms over the fallen body, her face distorted in a terrifying grin. She vows that once she is satisfied, Su Chen will be her next bloody victim. The group frantically discusses the logistics of their sick experiment. They debate how to prepare their meat supply, concerned only with maintaining their own strength for the days ahead. The leader snaps, his composure shattering. He bellows for his underlings to track down their missing cook, Duan, desperate to keep their gruesome operation running without further interruption or delay. A terrifying presence manifests, eyes glowing with supernatural intensity. The power shift is palpable, signaling that the predators are about to face a nightmare far worse than themselves. Energy surges through the air as a blinding light manifests, signaling the awakening of a dormant, high-tier ability that pulses with raw, terrifying power. Ethan finds himself enveloped in this volatile aura, his body reacting to the sudden influx of supernatural energy as his physical form begins to transform. The heat intensifies, yet Ethan feels his resilience skyrocket. His new physique-type ability is actively hardening his body against the harsh environmental extremes. His transformation continues as rippling muscle and surging strength overwhelm him, pushing his physical capabilities far beyond the limits of an ordinary human survivor. Ethan's senses sharpen amidst the power-up, and he immediately detects an intruder lurking nearby, sensing an unwanted presence violating his sanctuary. A pink-haired woman stands outside the door, desperate and wary of the chaos consuming the building, hoping to use her last bit of leverage to survive. The door clicks open, and Ethan stands before her, a towering figure of controlled intensity, questioning her presence as the heavy atmosphere hangs between them. The tension spikes as their encounter begins. The mysterious woman stands vulnerable before Ethan, her fate now hanging in the balance of his ruthless judgment. Duan stares in stunned shock, utterly flustered by the sudden and intensely awkward encounter right at Ethan's doorstep. Anxious shouts and frantic apologies echo down the hallway as the embarrassing misunderstanding leaves both of them deeply unsettled. Clearing his throat,
Ethan firmly points out that scarce apocalyptic supplies mean he cannot offer shelter based on looks alone. Recalling her strong-willed nature from his past life, Ethan contemplates recruiting her despite the extremely uncomfortable atmosphere. Recognizing the luxurious comforts of his powered apartment, Dwan urgently boasts her professional expertise as both a skilled chef and surgeon. Although intrigued by her medical background, Ethan continues playing hard to get, emphasizing how tight his resources truly are. After Dwan promises to do whatever it takes to stay, Ethan suddenly shifts gears and warm-heartedly welcomes her into his home. However, his friendly demeanor vanishes in an instant as Ethan sharply warns her that traitorous behavior will carry severe consequences.
If you want part 2 of this video, drop a comment. And at 1,000 likes, I'll release part 2. Tell us in the comments how much you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe for part 2.